And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
Right. Attention to roll call, people. Let's go.
That's right. Good morning. Get your coffee. Grab your coffee. It's 8:05 live Eastern time. And for me, I've been traveling by RV. So for a while, I was in Pacific time. Today, I'm in Mountain time. So it's 6:05 for me. Doesn't make a difference. We'll always be ready to get the information out and work with our friends and listeners to the podcast and talk about what's going on in New York City, politics, policing, or any other topic that we're willing to talk about. So, John, good morning. How's your weekend? We're back at it. It's Monday morning. What's going on?
Nothing, my friend. Too much stuff's going on, actually. Too much. You know, we're still being shadow banned terribly on all social media. So do us a favor, like and share this out. There's already 100 people with us this morning. Crazy weekend. I think we got a lot to talk about. We saw the chief of staff of the NYPD, the acting Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, Tariq Shepard, apparently shoved Tom Sullivan at the New York City Marathon. We're going to get into the squirrel and the raccoon that were killed, Peanut. And then there were viral videos coming out from the Florida-Georgia game from Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. So we'll break that down. But I think everybody this morning's waiting to hear about the incident that occurred at the New York City Marathon. So let's get into that. Like, what happened? What'd you hear? How did it happen? What went down?
First of all, before we go into that, shout out to Patrick Donahue. I love his sarcasm, his jokes. He writes, "I'm going to take lost time today. I don't think the show is going to have anything good to talk about." Shout out Patrick Donahue. I appreciate it. Sometimes I want to meet this guy one day. I mean, he has me cracking up. I love his old school humor. That's what we need to bring back, that old school humor that we have with the police department. Same thing I had in the military. Awesome. So shout out to you, brother. Shout out to all the friends and listeners of podcasts that are here right now. It's funny you say that, right, Patrick Donahue? Because every time I wake up, like, wow, what else? What else could happen? What other drama in the NYPD could happen that we could talk about? Because John and I are like, you know what? We'll hit another topic. And the second we say we're going to hit another topic, well, something else happened to the NYPD. It's like, all right, we were going to give another topic, but let's circle back because there's just so much drama going on. So, you know what this does, John? It solidifies everything we talk about in this podcast. There's no vision. There's no leadership in the police department. It's a big mishmash. And Tom Sullivan, he's just a simp. He's a placeholder for the New York City Police Department as police commissioner, which is a position of high esteem. And the real commissioners, the one voice for the department, has been a mixed bag. And it's between Kaz Daughtry, John Schell, and Tariq Shepard. And the three of them together, three musketeers, they've been the actual heads of the police department. I think Kaz Daughtry is ultimately the police commissioner. But the fact that we have an incident happening being a police commissioner and the chief of staff or whatever he is, I mean, we don't know. It's like these guys got more costumes than Halloween. It's getting ridiculous. So just to give you some backdrop. So what John and I both heard rumors all day, throughout the day. John was the first one to put it out, and the news, of course, mirrored what John had put out. So the information that we had is that there was some type of scuffle, some type of shouting match between the police commissioner and Tariq Shepard, who's now the chief of staff, which we think is not surprising, but again, completely unprofessional, embarrassment by the police department, and we have some questions. So let's get into that. Let's get into some of the questions that we're going to have about this, John.
Yeah. So what happens last night? New York City, yesterday, New York City Marathon. It's a major event in New York City. I mean, there's a lot of things you need to worry about on planning the event. Obviously, we saw the horrific terrorist attack in the Boston Marathon. So there's always the terrorism element of it. There's the public safety element of it. There's the traffic safety element of it too, as well, because, you know, it's a 5-borough run. So you're shutting down major arteries and New York City roadways to allow this. So you want the pedestrians to be safe. You still want to allow traffic to flow so people could get to where they have to get to. It's always a day, I'm not going to lie, that I never traveled. I was like, oh, it's the marathon today? Yeah, let's reschedule. I'm not doing that. You know, So you would have to know exactly where you were traveling through at what times and all that. So I think it's a major, major operation. It's probably the biggest operation in New York City that the New York City Police Department has to organize and plan. It's usually a great day, which is always good, and thank God for that. And that's, and that I think the NYPD needs a huge shout out for that every year. And again, even today, but again, I'm going to go back to, it's the people that make the wheels turn. It's not the people sitting up, taking the photos and taking and awarding themselves for having that happen and having what a safe day it was. That shout out goes to the rank and file NYPD members, as well as New York City residents and all of the organizations who help make that day possible. So they're outside of the THV. And you would say, oh, maybe tensions were flaring. New York City Police Commissioner and Tariq Shepard, who has flew through the ranks and really has not had much of a career in the NYPD. He's known to be a very arrogant person, very, very arrogant person. He shot up he made captain. He went right to deputy inspector in record speed. He was made a commanding officer almost right away upon becoming a captain. Then he's appointed directly to the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, an office he worked in almost the entirety of his career. So you would think that there's no one better suited to become the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, but that's not what happens. Actually, Tariq Shepard is by far, he will go down in history probably as the worst Deputy Commissioner of Public Information. And it's something he was groomed for his entire career, and he was absolutely horrible at it. So it shows you the competence level of Tariq Shepard. It shows you his arrogance level. He was berating reporters. He was lying to reporters when they would call up, and he was actually cursing reporters out. So, I mean, he's not someone that has a temperament to even be a rank and file police officer. Clearly why he never was. A lot of people I know him, and they all say the same thing about him. And, I'm not going to say it on the show because it'll get taken down, but like, he's an arrogant individual. He thinks who he is. He thinks his stuff doesn't stink. And him and the police commissioner are outside the THV, and there's a photo opportunity, and Kaz and everybody else basically bump Tom Donlin out. They show the entire world what myself and Eric have been saying, that every police commissioner has been an absolute puppet. Eric Adams runs the show, and Eric Adams' cronies. The operational police commissioner is Kaz Daughtry, and followed by Tariq Shepard. Now, it was rumored that Tariq Shepard was going to be the police commissioner at the end of this week. I don't know if that's still going to happen, but that was the rumor. But clearly, there's zero respect for Tom Donlin. Clearly.
Shout out to Rich Raj, $10. Rich Raj, we appreciate it. He's been putting his hand in his pocket every day. Coffee and donuts for New York's finest retired Unfiltered podcast. He says, good morning, guys. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for supporting us and being a great friend to the podcast. We appreciate this Monday morning. So, what's interesting, I want to say this, right? And I wonder if any of our active members of the police department or any law enforcement agency, retired guys, if you can relate to this. So I say this, Tariq, I know you. Now, I don't know him personally, but when I say I know you, is I've seen many people just like you. And it's this. It's where members in law enforcement, when they get rank, they assimilate it to muscle. Once they start to get promoted, they start to get muscle. And it happens with some police officers also. And what I mean by this is, Tariq, I know you. You're a coward. You're a weak man. You don't get tough with perpetrators, violent perpetrators in the street. But you get tough with fellow members of law enforcement because they don't come back at you. And you know what I'm talking about, active and retired listeners and friends of the podcast, or maybe law enforcement agencies in other parts of the country. You've worked with these type of people. They don't get tough with violent perpetrators in the street. They probably wouldn't help you if you fight with a violent perpetrator, but they get tough with other members of law enforcement. They get tough with their brothers and sisters because there's no repercussions. Now, especially in this police department right now, in this failed leadership and this nepotism that equates to corruption, there's obviously, there is no repercussions because we have not heard a word if there is going to be any discipline. So with that being said, I have questions. Here's one of my questions, John. Jeffrey Madry, supposedly by rumor, is who is the chief of the department of the New York City Police Department. For any outside listeners, according to reports, according to rumors that we've heard, that Jeffrey Madry actually split them up and hurled Tariq Shepard away from this shouting match. And from what I hear, some are rumored to say that there was actually some shoving involved. So I don't know. I don't want to blow this thing up, but there was definitely a shouting match between the two, and then Jeffrey Madry split them up. So did Jeffrey Madry report this to Internal Affairs? Did Tom Donnelly report this to Internal Affairs? Did Tariq Shepard report this? Did anyone else that was there that witnessed this, did they report it to Internal Affairs? Because last I checked, failing to report is a serious violation of the NYPD Patrol Guide, of NYPD policy. And again, goes back to what we've been saying in this podcast. Rules for thee and not for me. This is a complete embarrassment. And this story paints, it just gives you it's 1,000 words. It's a whole story. It's everything that we've been saying in this podcast. We're telling you there's no vision. There's no actual leadership. We're telling you who's actually in charge. It's John Schell, Kaz Daughtry, Tariq Shepard. We've been telling you that Tom Donnelly is not the real police commissioner. He's the interim police commissioner. We were bamboozled to believe that he was there to clean house. And what did we hear from Tom Donnelly? We heard from Tom Donnelly recently in an interview where he said he's not going to make any changes yet. He has to sit back and see what's going on with the police department and work with the leadership. So, Tom Donnelly, do you have to make any changes now? So here's a great picture. John put up this picture. It's John Schell, Kaz Daughtry, Tariq Shepard. And this paints 1,000 words right here, because where is Tom Donnelly? He's not in that picture. John, again, we have said it. There's no vision. There's no actual leadership. The police commissioner is no longer an important position that's held by someone that actually gets involved in operational procedures. These are the operational leaders and the managers of the actual New York City Police Department.
So this is the picture that supposedly sparked everything. So apparently you could see Tom Donnelly behind Tariq Shepard's shoulder. You could see Tariq Shepard looks annoyed. You could see, this is in the beginning of the marathon by the THV. So listen, police work is high tension, right? There's a lot of stress. Like I said, this is going over 5 boroughs. You're worried about a lot of different things. You need a lot of different things to fall in line to make a successful day, right? So I understand that at some points tempers will flare, right? I understand that. But that's not what's happening here. I think for those of you not in law enforcement, if you ever saw the movie The Departed, and they did an operation, and one of the guys cameraed up this place where they were running an undercover operation, and he forgot to camera up one part, and so they missed the whole thing on the camera. So all the cops start going nuts. Who the hell was this? Who are you? And they start fighting, right? And it kind of falls by the wayside because everybody understands, listen, it's everybody's tempers, and it kind of goes away. But what happens here is they basically shut Tom Donnelly out of this picture. And if you look right over Tariq Shepard's shoulder, you see Tom Donnelly hiding behind. And it's rumored that Tom Donnelly tried to get in the photo. Obviously, he is the police commissioner. And Tariq Shepard, who's a very big man, I believe he's over 6'3", I believe, maybe 6'4", 6'5", shoves the police commissioner. And then basically an altercation happens where there's a shoving match. And yes, Jeffrey Madry does have to physically remove them. And Tariq Shepard, from all accounts, and by the way, I know that these accounts happened, and I trust the people that told me them, so it definitely happened, started cursing at him like a thug on the street and yelling at the police commissioner and cursing at him like a real punk, and they had to both be removed inside of the THV, and I'm sure then they decided to scrub all the videos that happened around it. So you're right, Eric. What would normal procedure be if there was an on-duty altercation? Let's pretend this isn't the PC and his chief of staff. But you know what? Before we even do that, Tariq Shepard was recently appointed the chief of staff in a secret promotion. He went from deputy inspector to deputy commissioner, back to uniform and 3-star chief. 2 days prior to that, him being secretly moved into this position. A woman, chief, nice lady, well respected in the NYPD, well liked in the NYPD, was named the chief of staff for the police commissioner, Chief Terry Tobin. She's well respected. She's well liked, even though, people that continue to work for this administration, I raise my eyebrows at all of them. She is well respected in the ranks, and she's a nice lady, and I know her and I've met her. And she was named the chief of staff. And 2 days later, she put her papers in, and Tariq Shepard was secretly named the chief of staff. Do you believe that Tom Donlin appointed Tariq Shepard, who's basically the chief of staff, is the right hand of the police commissioner? Do you believe that Tom Donlin appointed Tariq Shepard to that position?
We just spoke about this offline before we started going live this morning, and right away that was the topic. Right away we said it's obvious and it's apparent that Tom Donlin did not appoint and promote Tariq Shepard to chief of staff and this secret Squirrel Society promotion. I absolutely not. So it had to be the hand of Eric Adams. Again, it just shows you that Eric Adams single-handedly, how important leadership is. Leadership is the most important element to any organization, especially in the police department. Such a vast, large police department. It was a large police department, but still a large police department, even when a diminished police department compared to others. How one man could destroy an organization. And not only that, one man has destroyed this entire city. Every agency in New York City is a complete epic fail, and especially New York City Police Department. Why? Because all eyes are on the New York City Police Department. It gets more critique than any other agency in New York City, probably than any other agency in the entire country. And right now, all eyes are on it. And again, I wanted to go back to this picture because it paints 1,000 words. Clearly, Tom Donlin did not appoint Tariq Shepard, because if he did, Tariq Shepard would have at least some gratitude. But this picture paints 1,000 words. And what it says to me also is, what was it like for Key Chan Sewell? Because exactly, which I didn't want to point out Tom Donlin initially in the beginning. I wanted to see it on your own, because it shows what was it like to be Key Chan Sewell, the first Black female police commissioner assigned to the police department, coming from another police department, a smaller police department, having to go through that transition, and especially also being a woman entering a boys' club. It must have been a horrible experience, and that's what we hear. And clearly, that's what's happened to Tom Donlin right now. So I guess maybe Tom Donlin was under the impression that he was actually going to be the police commissioner also. And again, it solidifies everything we've been saying. But that's why I think it's so important to hone in and put pressure on the other chiefs of the police department to say they're all compromised and infected by this failed leadership and this failed system, failed management of the police department. I always say, and I've been saying it for years, John, and I hope you agree. A lot of times people say the job sucks. This sucks. The job this, the job that. And I always say, who is the job? And the rank and file, yes, they're part of the job, but this is the job right here. The management of the police department, they're the job. They're the ones that control. Leadership controls the tempo, sets the tone, sets policy, sets the vision, and sets the representation, the image of the police department to the public. That's the job. They're the job. So when you say the job sucks, they suck, because they're all bums. Get these bums out. They have destroyed the most iconic police department in the entire world. People are laughing. The department has become a joke. I want to give a shout out to someone else that gave us coffee and donuts over here. Let's see. Thank you so much. Upstate Detective, thank you so much. Excuse me. $9.99 to the podcast. Coffee and donuts. Get myself a baker's dozen over here. Great podcast. Stay safe, brothers. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Seems like I haven't seen you before, Upstate Detective. We go live Monday through Friday, unless something's going on. We'll definitely keep you informed. VSS Ventura's $5. Thank you so much, brother. Here's some rubles for the Diabetes Fund. Tariq is a prime example of how someone could achieve so much all while doing so little. I mean, again, he was promoted by rocket fuel. Why do we have to have people promoted by rocket fuel, even if they're part of nepotism, or it's someone, for instance, if Eric Adams, rhetorically speaking, if Eric Adams was a good leader and he saw Tariq Shepard had the potential, why not put him in the right position at his rank and let him let him get involved and talk to people, but you don't have to elevate him to rocket fuel. Again, remember, John, it sure pays off. Remember when Eric Adams was initially indicted and Tariq Shepard, Tariq Shepard was taking Adams to court, and he was everywhere by his side, and we were saying, what is this for? Well, clearly it paid off because it was another promotion for Tariq Shepard.
Yeah, so Snakes Plissken says it's not the Boy Scouts. Sometimes men get into it. I agree. And and there's a time and place, and there's things that are understandable. But over a photo, men get into it over a photo. The people that are the top, and I'm not talking about in the top of the upper echelon. I'm talking about the top of the echelon, 1 and 2. 1 and 2, the New York City Police Commissioner and his supposedly appointed chief of staff, but we all know it's mayoral appointed, right? Because we all know behind the scenes. Listen, I haven't spoke to Chief Terry Tobin, and I haven't spoke to anybody up there about this, but I could see clearly with my eyes, all the way from over here in Northeast Florida, I could see clearly what happened. Tom Donilon appointed Chief Terry Tobin to his chief of staff, and Eric Adams said, absolutely not. You're putting my buddy Tariq in there. Tariq's going to be a chief of staff. And next thing you know, he's playing Halloween dress up with 3 stars on his chest. Like, that's not a right on his shoulders like that. So there's zero respect, and that's the point what we were saying when there were talks about Tish, when there were talks about, oh, it should be this guy. This guy's great. This girl's great. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. Eric Adams runs the NYPD. Kaz Daughtry's still going to be the operational police commissioner. And I don't even know what Tariq Shepard does. He's clearly not good at dealing with people. He has serious anger issues. And someone's like, oh, they should have a smoker. Listen, Tom Donilon's an elderly man. I don't believe that Tom Donilon should have a smoker with someone who's 6'6", but shout out to Tom Donilon for defending himself. You know what I mean? If Tariq, if you're interested in having a smoker, hit me up. I'm always game for the garden. We could raise a lot of money for a good cause, But like to say that Tom Donilon should do it, this is the police commissioner. This is these are the people who set the example for the rank and file. So let's talk about it now. Let's play devil's advocate. Let's play that this is a sergeant and a lieutenant right now. They're at a detail and they get into a physical altercation over a photo opportunity, not over a crime scene, not over an arrest, not over something horrible where their adrenaline's flowing, over a photo op. Over a photo op, Eric, what happens? What happens to that lieutenant and that sergeant that get into that? First of all, and I'm just going to give you the example. The lieutenant tries to get into the photo and the sergeant shoves him and tells him to get out of here because the sergeant's on the lieutenant's list, and the rumor is he's about to be promoted, and the lieutenant's getting the boot.
That's a great question. So typically, normally in the police department, that sergeant would be at least modified, but definitely, I would say I would put my money, that sergeant would be suspended. Now, in this police department, where there's a 3-tiered system, we have to ask, what are they wearing and who are they? That's why it's so different with this police department, right? It's a 3-tiered system. I say it all the time. Here's the 3 tiers. General population that wears blue pants, the rank and file. Your khaki pants, that's your other tier. And we can give you examples to show you and actually solidify that also. And your other tier is the upper management of police department. So if it was a sergeant and a lieutenant that are part of general population, if they're not in khaki pants and they're not part of this crew right here, that sergeant is going to get suspended. But again, policy does no longer apply to the entire police department. It applies differently based on the 3-tiered system. Exactly what I just said. If it was a sergeant and a lieutenant in the khaki pants, probably something different. Now, I know some people say, well, sometimes this should be a profession that's built around masculinity and testosterone, and these things could happen. Yes, but that's why it's so important that we have other masculine men around that can put their egos aside and say, hey, you guys want to talk this out? You want to work this out? Not here. Do it somewhere else. That's extreme professionalism, especially Tariq Shepard. You're the chief of staff. Tom Donilon, you're the police commissioner. But Tariq Shepard especially, you're the chief of staff. You've been promoted by rocket fuel. You need to put your emotions aside and you need to be professional because you set the tone for the entire police department. Why should any member of rank and file actually follow any laws right now? Rules and policies of the police department. Why should they be respectful? They've just set the tone of how the leadership should move in step. KB, I want to say thank you so much for coffee and donuts. Thank you for rescuing us because that's what you said here. $10.13. That's a 1013. Shout out to you, brother. What happened to the job we all loved? Absolutely. Eric Adams and his cronies made his own Tammany Hall, much like G.W. Plunkett. Exactly. It only takes one man to destroy an entire administration because leadership is responsible. And Eric Adams has created epic fail by promoting weak, egotistical men to the positions of power. And when you put people in power that have egos and they're weak and insecure, this is a byproduct and this is a result. And we've been saying for quite some time that this is what could happen. And look, you're seeing it right now. Vic C, shout out to you, brother. $5. We get some coffee and donuts. I appreciate it. He says, enjoy a protein shake, Eric. After all those morning push-ups, you and I have been suspended on the spot. Absolutely. Suspended on the spot. But again, does anybody disagree with me? I believe it's a 3-tiered system right now. If someone says there's another tier, another layer of the police department, let us know right now because I see it as khaki pants, upper management, and the general population. John, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, Tariq Shepard should be demoted, in my opinion. You know, if Tom Donilon had a pair of nuts in his pants, he would have demoted him right there. I mean, this is someone who is cursing out the media. This is someone who cannot control his temper. It's not someone that should be in leadership whatsoever. So, I mean, and now you're the police commissioner. I'm just going to take it back to, listen, I think that, a lot of, everyone knows I read a lot of mob history. I watch a lot of mob history. Shout out to Corruption Connection, former NYPD cop turned mob historian. Not turned mob historian, always was. But I watch a lot of that stuff. It interests me because it ties in so heavily with the police department and New York City public corruption. So, I mean, that's all what that's my entertainment. That's my form of entertainment. And watching this, it just shows how bad of a state of leadership New York City's in. There is no leadership. It's a complete, utter disaster. And when I looked at the rank structure in the police department, it reminded me of what a mafia family is, right? You have the head, you have captains, you have lieutenants, you have soldiers, and it's basically organized like that. And the thing that is the biggest no-no in the mafia, in the rank structure of the Italian mafia, is you will never put your hands on the boss. It's the ultimate sin. You could have been the best earner. You could bring in millions and millions and millions of dollars to the family. If you put your hands on the boss, it's over. Because and it should be the same here. You shove the police commissioner, it's over. You're done. You're out. He should at least be suspended right on the spot and immediately demoted. He's in an appointed position. He should go back to what he really is and give him time to relearn to how to be a captain. I mean, we can't send him back to the academy and have him do his impact all over again and actually have him become a cop. He's going to live with his 22 collars. It is what it is. We have plenty of ball. He has double the amount of arrests than Eric Adams has. So, I mean, he's double the cop Eric Adams was. So we can't redo the whole thing, but let's put him back to be like, Tariq, we no longer need you in this position. You're appointed. Tom Donilon, how many days you got left at this point? Maybe this little altercation buys you a month. Maybe. What do you have to lose? Demote this loser. Let Eric Adams come out of his face, that loser too, and put this idiot back up for absolutely no reason. Seriously, what do you have to lose? Demote him. He should be demoted back to captain right now. I honestly think he committed the ultimate sin. One, because it's the police commissioner. Two, because he's an elderly man and you're 6'6". What kind of person are you? This is the kind of person that hits women. This is the kind of person that bullies people. This is the kind of person that bullies their authority when they're a cop and doesn't know how to actually have controlled aggression. He's not controlled. He's not. He's a loser. He's proved it over and over again. He's incompetent. He has a terrible temper. He should have been suspended on the spot. He should be immediately demoted. And you brought up a great point, Eric. Did they call IAB and start an investigation? You know they didn't. So listen, when you guys get into an altercation out there, you get into an altercation with your sergeant or your lieutenant, don't call IAB on each other. And when they ask you, when someone rats you guys out and you have to go down to IAB, what happened? Oh, I don't know. I just followed what I saw at the marathon. Nobody called IAB there. I didn't think it was a big deal. I thought this is how we handle things.
Spot on, brother. Absolutely. Because they set the tone. They're the leadership of the police department, and the rank and file is going to mimic, and they should mimic what goes on with the leadership, because the leadership is supposed to set the tone. They're supposed to set the tempo. They're supposed to lead by example. The rank and file is supposed to follow suit of what goes on at the top, the management of police department or any organization. That's why it's so important who's in leadership. So the question also is this: if Tariq Shepard, as the chief of staff, is willing to push Tom Donlin, who's the police commissioner, what is he going to do to some rookie cop that was involved in some incident that he didn't like? What is he going to do to some sergeant, some frontline sergeant that wears blue pants? It's not part of khaki pants. What is he going to do to some two-star chief? Huh? Those two-star chiefs out there that are afraid to stand up and say what the atrocities that are going on with the police department. Again, I'm going to continue to say it. I stand by my position, and so does John. Every chief in the police department is infected, compromised, and you're all bums, and you need to go, because not one of you is going to stand up and say, you know what? This is absolutely not the representation of the police department that I stand for, that I'm chief so-and-so, and this is not the representation of the police department that I stand for, and I would not treat my personnel, and I would not treat anyone that's above me in that manner. Again, I always say it all the time. I believe you do not have to respect everyone, but you should treat them with respect. I mean, John and I had Cop Watch on here. Jose LaSalle had stalked my career for about 8 years. There was extreme amount of opposition. He came on this podcast, and I showed him respect. We're supposed to respect each other. That's how we get to the next barrier. That's true strength. And what Tariq Shepard showed here is actually a complete weakness. It shows how his egos are more important than anything else. And I've been saying that. Egos over everything. This is the most insecure, most inadequate, weak, and cowardice administration I've ever seen. And again, that's why I want to ask John, before I ask this question, I just want to read this out. Joe Spokes, $20 to the podcast. We'll get ourselves some bagels. You know what? I'll hold this $20 when we get to New York. We'll have some bagels and coffee together. I do miss some New York bagels. Adam's Crime Syndicate. The only thing is his upper echelon and not that bright, and I'm more worried about look and at me instead of making the organization strong. These people are wearing the city. Absolutely. What's more important to these people is a media tour. Their legacy is going to be media and pictures. That's what's so important. It was so important for them that they have a picture together, because those are the true people leading the job right now. That's the Three Musketeers that are ruining this job right now, and it was so important for them to. And look at Tom Donlin's background. I mean, it speaks volumes to what's going on here. So again, that's why I just want to ask you, John. Do you agree with me when I say the job is the upper management? That these three, they're the job, and that's why the job sucks.
I mean, they're the ones that are setting all the policy. I don't think they're the job. I think that we're everyone on the job makes the entire job. And I think that's why when you follow orders from these corrupted, egotistical, highly, grossly incompetent individuals, there's a problem. You know, when you're not taking it where it's coming from. I think ultimately they set the policy and they set the tone of the job. Are they totally the job? No. But if you're going to be the sergeant, you're going to be Tariq Shepard or Cass Daughtry told me this, and then you're rushing it down, or you're that CO or you're that lieutenant. You know, and I'm not knocking anybody, because I was like that at points in my career too. But like, they set the tone for the job. They set the tone, and the tone is there is no tone. It's literally everything is a photo opportunity. Everything is a photo op. Everything is virtue signaling, and it's all fake, and it's all being done by highly incompetent, corruptible individuals who really have no business with a badge or a gun. And they show it every day, whether it's dealing with reporters, whether it's dealing with the public, when it's dealing with subordinates, whether it's dealing with their peers, or even dealing with their supervisors. They prove it day in and day out. They're highly incompetent, they're corruptible, and they're setting the tone for the rank and file. And then when I see videos that go viral and I see guys being heavy-handed, egotistical, don't know how to properly have aggressive control, don't know what masculinity is, don't know when to use force and when not to use force, don't understand the basics of morality and the basics of social interaction. I'm like, well, I can't blame them. They're being led by these morons. I don't blame these young kids. I know why. I know why Kaz Daughtry surrounds himself with very young cops. I know why Tariq Shepard surrounds himself with very young cops. I understand why. It's because they're impressionable. They think you're cool. You give them a police department that no one ever worked in, right? Where I could come into work, I could work out for 2 hours, I could play Xbox for 3 hours. We go out for 2 hours, do some work, and then I come back in while I'm on overtime. We play PlayStation again. You gave them a police department that no one's ever experienced before. You gave them a police department where you could curb stomp somebody's head and be back full duty with no problem. So I understand why they're loyal to a fault to you. I get that, but like that's what people have to understand is why they surround themselves with these young people, because any person with experience, any person with integrity would never work a day in a vehicle with these people, nor would hold any orders they gave would hold any weight with an individual who has integrity, because you'd say like, you know what, who the hell is this guy anyway? And why is Tariq Shepard telling me anything? Why is Kaz Daughtry telling me anything? Why? Well, seriously, what have they done? What have they done other than drive Eric Adams around, kiss Eric Adams' ass, drive Jeffrey Madry around? What have they done to say that they should, either of them should be in these positions? Nothing. And by the way, they're terrible at them. They're terrible. It's not even like I could see. Listen, I guarantee I could grab detectives right now and make them the police commissioner, and they would be awesome. I could make them the deputy commissioner operation, and they would be awesome. I could make them the deputy commissioner public information, and they would be awesome. But these two are absolutely horrible. So it's like I don't get what the grandstanding is, and everything is a photo op. Everything is a highly produced video. Nothing that they do is effective. Like, I mean, look at Kaz Daughtry and his Canal Street videos. That's what I like to call them. They go out, they go to Roosevelt Avenue, they create a video, they chase everybody on the block for about 3 hours, and then they leave. They do all this media. They have all these talking heads coming up, and oh yeah, look what they're doing. And then 2 hours later, it's right back to where it was, because it's not about actually correcting a problem. It's all about how it looks. It's all about egos. It's all about photo ops. That's what it is. And that's why there's a brawl over a photo op, because it's the most important thing in the job, not public safety.
The upper management are weak and cowards, just like Juju, who's here, our typical troll here. Juju says, Eric, don't forget to drop the address when you get to New York City. You deserve a proper welcome. Absolutely. You know what? When I eventually go to New York City, I'll give you my address. No problem. You don't have the balls to come anyway. But no problem.
How come no one showed up to my event? I thought they were all going to come to the event. I was there a few weeks ago. Nobody came.
John gave out his address where he's coming to his event. No one showed up. And the same thing would go for you, Juju. I'll give you my address. No problem. But I don't think you have the balls to show up. You know? And I won't ask you to do a smoker, because you don't deserve to do a smoker. My ring's outside, brother. So anytime you want to come by, be a pleasure. Scooch, thank you so much for donating to the podcast. $19.99. That's more cold for your donuts. We appreciate it, brother. Absolutely. Again, this is a weak Caddis administration. It's inept and it's inadequate. I can't think of one policy that was implemented by Tariq Shepard or Kaz Daughtry or John Shell that is going to be a legacy that we're going to say, you know what, thank God that these guys were in leadership, because here is something they implemented that was in the best interest of the rank and file in the police department. It's actually going to be effective in public safety. Actually, what I see right now is I think we've seen 2 deaths in 2 weeks involved in vehicle pursuits in New York City right now. That's a horrible representation of the police department. And as far as I'm concerned, the blood is on the hands of John Shell because of that. Kaz Daughtry is spending billions of dollars right now for public safety for a drone program that, honestly, I think is going to be an epic fail. I think that drones are good as a supplemental tool, but the way that Kaz Daughtry and Eric Adams are trying to sell this first responder program, I believe is going to be an epic fail. And Tariq Shepard has been promoted by rocket fuel and has deteriorated the relationship between the police department and the journalist as he just, is spewing profanities and journalism, just being completely unprofessional, and no one's holding them accountable. Of course, we see the progressive byproduct results of the actions of the upper echelon of the police department because they're not being held accountable, right? It was rumored that Tariq Shepard cursed out a reporter, and now he's pushing and shoving Tom Sullivan to not get into a picture. I mean, what is next? What is this administration capable of? And again, I know sometimes, John, you say pretty fond things and you're pretty kind when it comes to Jeffrey Maddrey. But I hold Jeffrey Maddrey responsible because all he did was push this under the rug and sweep this under the rug like everything else. His civilian complaint, that was swept under the rug. Many actions by Kaz Daughtry, that was swept under the rug. And this incident also, Jeffrey Maddrey tried to sweep that under the rug also. So I hold him responsible. He's the chief of the department. He's the one that groomed Kaz Daughtry and brought him up, and he's also close to Tariq Shepard. So I blame Jeffrey Maddrey. I sure do. Just if our kids make mistakes, we hold our parents responsible. I hold him accountable also.
Yeah, well, listen, all I say about Jeffrey Maddrey is I think he's the most level-headed one of all of them. But I've said over and over again that Eric Adams needs to be removed from office, and the entire upper echelon, all of these people right here, need to be immediately removed from office. They should have been removed the minute the scandal broke out. They should have been removed the minute that it was apparent that city resources were being used to help and further a shakedown extortion racket that they were all aware of. So at that point, but when it comes to public facing, I think Jeffrey Maddrey is the most level-headed. But I've said numerous times, I still don't think he should even has any business being a 3-star chief. Based upon his record, anybody else would not have ever achieved the rank that he had. Based upon the things he had on and off duty, it would never happen. EP says, for the past 6 months, John and Eric have not had to come up with the topics of the day. The department creates them. At this point, the department should receive co-producer credits. You're 100% right. And the memes that they hate, they make themselves. And that's why we coined the phrase, the memes make themselves. Because we're not making these memes. They are. They make themselves memes. So this is the photo of them at the finish line holding the trophy. You clearly see awkwardness, right? They put Donlin and Tariq together. You see the awkwardness right there. It's a highly dysfunctional family. Again, I think Tariq Shepard should be immediately demoted, if not forced to resign out of the police department altogether. Absolute insanity. We saw over the weekend, before we switch topics and get off the NYPD, we saw over the weekend the NYPD Police Academy was vandalized. Police Academy, 24/7 security, cameras everywhere, and it was vandalized. Our good friend Sal Greco had reported on that first, and nobody gave him credit. And now, all the news ran with it. Eric, the police academy being vandalized, how much does the lack of leadership play into that happening?
I'm glad you asked that, right? 100% the blame is on the leadership when you have a breach of security. Absolutely, because this leadership is inept, it's inadequate. They're more worried about their egos. They're more worried about taking videos and taking pictures. And again, this actually reflects upon Kaz Daughtry. We could just ping pong Kaz Daughtry's misdirection and his deflection of what he said during an interview. What did Kaz Daughtry say? He said that this department is not distracted, that the police officers don't even know what's going on. Well, you know what? The leadership doesn't know what's going on because clearly they are distracted. They're distracted because of a corruption probe going on. They're distracted because there's no actual leadership. They're distracted because they're more concerned about making videos. Since when does the police department have to sell an operation? When does the police department have to go to Roosevelt Avenue or different parts of the city to sell an operation, to sell you that they're going to get this operation done? Just give you the data of what's going on, do the operation, and then give the data of the results once the operation is completed and we can actually visually see the results of that operation conducted by the police department, because it's exactly what John Shell said. How do they fight crime? By getting on shows and actually changing your perception and fighting your own truth. And that's what's going on with this police department. This breach of security is reflective of a failed management, failed leadership of the police department, failed under the administration of Eric Adams. That, to me, was a test. That was just a goof. They were playing around. But what else could they do? Could they get in? Could they get a bomb in there and kill brand new recruits and kill everyone that's at the police academy? Yes. To me, that was a test. That was actually just a goof, just to see if they could actually breach security. And it shows there's a lot of holes in the police department right now, and those holes are in the leadership. And these leaders need to go. They're bums. Again, what do I hear constantly? That these chiefs are compartmentalized and they don't know what else is going on. So you tell me right now, so if the chief that runs the police academy has no idea what's going on, then we have a huge problem. Well, clearly, they don't know what's going on at the academy. We could have lost lives here. This is actually very serious. This is a complete goof here, but again, this could be very serious. Vito 11, shout out to you, brother. 1999 to the podcast. More coffee and donuts. I appreciate it. I am third generation NYPD, so definitely a deity. Shout out to you. I think I may be the dinosaur in the room. Came on in 73, retired 2000. Never have been so disgusted and embarrassed like I feel from these clowns. Keep up the good work. Absolutely. Shout out to you, Vito 11. Look, Vito 11 came out in 73 where times were tough in the city. The city was pretty much bankrupt at that time. They were getting attacked by Black Panthers. There's a high level of corruption seeped through the police department. Failed leadership, right? You have Mayor Lindsay at the time. It's just, complete liberalism. And yet Vito 11 is saying this is the worst that he's seen it. John, you and I both have said this is the worst representation of the police department we have ever seen. So shout out to you, Vito 11. Thank you so much for your service. And I hope you're enjoying your retirement. Thank you so much for being a friend to the podcast. VSS Ventura, another $5 on the podcast. He said, you guys are wrong about this bunch making good policies. They have left us highlight reel of how not to act, speak, or police. Madry has 10 shins. Absolutely. Absolutely. They set the tone, and the tone they set is terrible for the rank and file. If I was the rank and file, I don't know why you would follow any policy. Why? Again, exactly what you said, John. Go to a GO15, which is a general order 15, where you have to get interviewed and it's recorded, and just say, well, I saw the leadership do A, I saw the leadership do B, and that's why I didn't follow it. I follow what the leadership's doing. I thought that's a new policy. I thought we don't notify IAB anymore. I thought you don't get suspended. I thought you don't get modified. I thought you could actually curb stomp. You could stomp someone on their head and you could be full duty. I didn't know. So I was following what's going on with the police department. John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that you're seeing a complete breakdown of the wheels that actually make the NYPD turn, because they've infected themselves and their loser, incompetent friends in every position. I'm sure if we look at who's in charge of any of these details, headquarters security, the police academy security, I wonder who they're going to be friends with. You think they're going to be friends with Kaz Daughtry and Tariq Shepard and Eric Adams? I bet you they are. I bet you they're trying to bring joy back to America, right? And this is the joy that we've brought back: complete incompetence. No way that anybody should have been able to vandalize the New York City Police Academy. It's 24/7 security. That's an embarrassment. That's a breakdown. That's a disgrace. There's no way that Tariq Shepard should have been able to put his hands on the NYPD Police Commissioner and continue to be up in the upper echelon of the NYPD. So before we get off, last question for you. Before we get off on this topic, and then we'll move over to Peanut the Squirrel, I just have one last question for you. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to Tariq Shepard? What's going to happen to Tom Donilon?
It's so funny. I was excited to ask you the same question. I'm glad you asked that, because right now we're asking we're talking about what should happen, what normally happens with the police department, the policy that we know, and what would happen to John, what would happen to me, what would happen to Sal Greco, Marlon, anyone that's active here, anyone that's retired when you were on the job, what would have happened to you? I think nothing's going to happen. I think nothing's going to happen right now. Eric Adams is going to pretend like nothing happened. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if Eric Adams gets questioned about it, and he'll say, I can predict it right now. He's going to say, this has been misconstrued. They had a gentleman disagreement. Jeffrey Madry just didn't want people to hear the conversation. And then when Tom Donlin steps down in a couple of days or a week, whatever the case is, when he steps down, I say, listen, he's got a family time to take care of. Eric Adams is going to completely deflect and nothing will happen. I don't think Tariq Shepard is going to be held accountable. And I think that Tom Donlin is not going to put his foot down on it either. I'm glad he stood up for himself on the scene. That was his immediate response and immediate action. But going forward, I don't think Tom Donlin is going to do anything. I mean, look, he's been a placeholder during this time. He's accepted that. He's actually said during the interview that he doesn't see any changes that need to be made, which we were under the impression that he was there to clean house. So I think nothing's going to happen. Buzzard McCain, $9.99 to the podcast. Thank you so much. More coffee and donuts. Said vandalized 20 feet from front desk of police cabinet. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, was that a total goof? I think it was a goof. They got in there, put some spray paint. But it's scary. It's really scary when you think about it, because if this was a test for potential terrorism, then the test was an epic fail for the police department. It shows that how easily the police department can be breached, especially the police academy, where we have recruits that are not unarmed. We have, that would be the best target actually for terrorism, because here are people that are supposed to fill the shoes and getting more manpower to the police department. They're unarmed. It's an easy target. It's a soft target, right? The only ones that are armed is the police officers that are doing security there, or maybe police officers there that are in training in and out of the building. This is actually a huge problem. I think it's very scary. I think it should be taken very serious.
There was literally a rappel rope coming down from the roof. Now, I don't know if anyone was on the roof. I would assume they would have to get there to get to the rappel. So it appeared that somebody was on the roof. And then this took enough time that somebody should have known what the hell was going on. This took enough time. You know what I mean? This is multiple cans of paint right here. So it's more than just a little vandalism, and it shows this is what's happening throughout the department. This is what's happening on every 911 call. This is what's happening in every precinct. And this is what happens when you put incompetent people in charge. I see people on here saying they made their bones. They have over 20 years in the department. They didn't make their bones. They drove people around. They kissed ass. They did not do what the average cop has to do. I don't care if you were a patrol cop running Sector Adam your entire career. You are way more experienced than these two are. Way more. You know way more about the inner workings of the job. You understand the job. You understand the operations. You know way more. And by the way, you have more supervisory experience as well, because they don't have that either. The only thing they've seen is wheeling and dealing. So I'm going to say right now they have no business being there. I think ultimately there's two things that could happen. Either Tom Donlin has bought himself a little more time in the rank of police commissioner, interim police commissioner, or Eric Adams will immediately remove him. Let's see what this week's press conferences hold out. Eric Adams is always one for shock. He's a walking one-man entertainment show. So his administration is a walking one-man entertainment show. So let's see what happens. We got about 1,088 people on here. We appreciate you for joining us this morning. We just talked about Tom Donlin being shoved by his chief of staff, the one that Eric Adams appointed, and he didn't, in our opinion. So if you guys could do us a favor, if you could like this space, if you could subscribe to it wherever you're watching or listening, and if you could share it out, we would appreciate it. We'll try to get to all your comments. We're about a half hour behind on those. And Crazy 107 donates $10.99 to the podcast. He says, total embarrassment when Kaz, most public representative of the department, physically grunts and breathes heavily when criticized, yet the media pretends these are experienced police professionals. I agree, Crazy 107. I think they've gotten such a pass on this administration, especially the way that they handled themselves with dealing with two retired lieutenants who decided to come out and have a podcast where we give our anecdotal experience and we give our true, honest opinions, and the way they handle memes. I mean, even you remember Kaz Daughtry attacking Rocco Parascandola of the Daily News, and that blew over. The media turned a complete blind eye to all of the immature messaging that we've got on social media, the threats from their criminal friends. The media are completely complicit in all this, and I blame all of them. Now, some of the media are disgusted by this. Don't get me wrong, because I have spoken with people in the background. So has Eric Dim. And they're disgusted by it, and they know it's wrong. But hey, listen, everybody's got a boss, right? There's politics and everything, right? So, everybody used to love when I would go on Newsmax. I would get calls all the time. Or when I would go on Fox, everybody would love it. Oh, I love it. I love it. All this stuff. And then boom, the politics. What happens? There's higher ups that don't want that message getting out there. They don't want you to see who these people are. They don't want you to know that Eric Adams is running a criminal enterprise and put his friends in charge of the New York City Police Department, who are grossly incompetent and who also hang out with known criminals are involved in corruption. So, yeah, the media is completely complicit in all of this. This is just yet another example of failure, of gross incompetence. This is Eric Adams, New York City, this photo right here. This is the NYPD on gross incompetence and corruption.
John, Sherry gave you a nice compliment. I think that was nice. Sherry said, let me read it here if I can find it. Comments are flying in. I want to thank the friends that listen to the podcast. I love the comments. I love when you guys weigh in with us, and it really builds the network. Sherry says, John, go back to Newsmax. We need to hear you. Absolutely, brother. Definitely. True perspective, real perspective, not just back to blue, but actually a fair assessment of what's going on. But I think ultimately, I think I could go on for days talking about this breach of security with the police academy, but really what it shows is the diminished police department, and also the plan or ineffective plan by the leadership of the police department right now is really starting to show its face. Because what we see is police officers that are removed from their precincts to fill in spots so that they can displace crime, right? We see the plan is omnipresent. So we see police departments from the entire city. Police precincts from the entire city, housing locations and transit, having to remove police officers from their everyday duties to fill spots in the subway, to fill spots on Roosevelt Avenue, to fill these details to try to shut down and try to get involved in these operations to shut down crime. So all they do is rob them from Peter to pay Paul. I think we say that quite often in this podcast. So there are holes that are going to be missed, especially since we have a failed leadership right now, and they're not paying attention. And then, yes, they are distracted because of a corruption probe. They're distracted because there's no actual pyramid of leadership in the police department. And this is the byproduct. This breach of security should raise alarms right now. And if we had a mayor that actually cared, he would say, wait a minute, okay, we need to stop right now. We need to get back to a wholesome police department to make sure this doesn't happen again. How was this missed? This has to be investigated. But I believe that the reason why this happened is because we have so many holes in the police department. It's like if you had a big giant bucket and you had a bunch of holes and you were pouring water into it, there's only so many hands you have to close those holes. And that's what they're doing. And I speak to police officers on a daily basis. And they're overworked. They tell me, I speak to police officers, they're in housing, and one day they're in transit. And I speak to police officers, they're in the 4-4 precinct, and one day they're in transit, or one day they're at the police academy. So we're moving and juggling around. There's too much juggling going on in the police department right now, and things are getting messed up in translation, really miscommunication, and this is the byproduct, and it could be far worse. And hopefully something bad turns into something good. This should be the indicator. Wait a minute. We have to stop doing that. This plan of omnipresence and moving police officers and jumbling them around to go to other locations is not working. It's clearly ineffective. So speaking of ineffective, let's talk about our police officers. Unfortunately, we support the rank and file, but I think this video speaks on the training of the police department, speaks on a lot of failures. There's a lot of layers to talk about when it comes to this video. So, John, I'll let you start the video, and then we'll give our presentation on it.
Yeah, so this is the last thing on the NYPD. I'm sorry. We're going to talk about Peanut in a second, and then we're going to talk about the Jacksonville incidents that happened at the Florida-Georgia game. But this is the last thing. I think this is very important to highlight. So you see what appears to be a public safety team in the NYPD. They stopped a car at a crosswalk, so it appears that there was a stop. Appears there was a stop for criminal behavior, right? And what you see is multiple cops. You see them get out. They speak to an individual. They're laughing. They're walking back to their car. One cop actually has his hand on the individual who's wearing a white T-shirt, which is basically a see-through shirt. The individual is saying something to them. There's rap music, so I'm not going to play the video because you can't hear what they're saying. And the individual is like basically talking smack to them, walking back, even though it appears that they told him to beat it. He's walking backwards. As soon as the cops pull away, watch what he does. As soon as he pulls away, he lifts up his shirt, exposes he has a 9mm right in his waistband, right under his see-through white shirt. Complete, utter breakdown. I don't know what the initial stop was for. I hate to Monday morning quarterback people, but this is terrible. It highlights two things for me. I see that Eric Adams and the NYPD continuously talk about how many guns they've confiscated off of New York City streets since Eric Adams has been the mayor. And I continuously say that is just a highlight in the failure in public safety. I am a supporter of the Second Amendment. However, I do believe there are people based upon their criminal history that should not carry firearms. I do believe that there are people who illegally carry firearms. I believe there are people who have deemed themselves to be illegal. There are rules and regulations in place for New York City for who can and who cannot carry firearms on New York City streets. If you want to carry a firearm, follow those policies. If you're unhappy with their policy, move to a different state. Florida, you could open carry, right? You still have rules and regulations around that. When you violate those rules, you should be arrested. This person is clearly carrying an illegal firearm, is clearly not licensed. And I'm pretty sure when we look at his criminal history, he's going to have a large one. So to me, this just highlights another failure in public safety because you see just how many people are carrying illegal firearms on New York City streets. And you see the lack of fear of the NYPD, which is ultimately the lack of fear of being arrested because there are no consequences that they will face. So this is a society on progressive politics. This is what New York City has become. Zero fear of the police. Absolutely zero fear of the police. Zero fear of breaking any law. Zero fear of brandishing illegal firearms on New York City streets. Is the NYPD, this person was identified, is the NYPD going to go after him? I'm sure they will after we do this podcast, but they wouldn't have if this didn't go mainstream.
So we're talking about legislation, we're talking about politics, and how the media has really affected policing in America, and how politics has infected policing. And we see it right here, right? There's guns everywhere. Towards the end of my tenure of my career, the last year of, from 2021 into 2022, I couldn't believe how many guns were out there. I mean, guns were just falling off people. Cops were getting guns by accident, including myself. What does it also reflect? It reflects not also how many guns are actually apprehended, but how many guns are actually missed. Because they say for every time a gun is apprehended, there's thousands that are actually missed. And this also goes to the lack of training that's going on in the police department right now. We don't have veterans of the police department. We don't have good leadership to teach these police officers. This is an epic fail. The fact that they missed this firearm is terrible. I don't know how to toss to these guys these days, but this is terrible. I can tell you this. I seen it with my own eyes, and hopefully this experience would save the lives of these two particular police officers, and hopefully they can teach others, turn something bad into something good. I was working one time, I was standing at the desk. My guys were bringing in a collar, and I was, the desk is kind of high up, and two cops, two uniformed cops. I was in plainclothes at the time. I was a crime sergeant. I was a special operations lieutenant, and two cops were bringing in a perpetrator, and I could just see the appearance, the way the perpetrator was walking, kind of stiff-legged. So right away caught my eye, and I said, "Did you guys toss him?" They said, "We're just transporting." So I knew right away from that response that they didn't check him good. They were just transporting a perpetrator for someone else. They didn't want to get involved, but it could have been their own line. So I said, "Toss him again." I watched these two cops toss the perpetrator in front of me. Actually, the arrestee, because now he's under arrest, at the desk, and they missed it. I put on a pair of gloves. I walked over. I reached into his waistband and pulled out a load of 25. And again, that was then. It's only getting worse now. These cops, they're not getting the proper training because they don't have veteran cops out there to teach them. They don't have leadership. And the fact that they missed this firearm is an epic fail. And thank God he's actually laughing about it and just making a rap video because he could have hurt them. He could have killed them. The fact that they missed it. But you know what? What's important to these cops right now is that they have a cool uniform. They look cool. That's what's important to them. It's sad. They should look at this and say, thank God we're alive right now. How did you miss that? I mean, we're missing the context of the stop. We don't know what the legal justification is, what the pretextual tools actually utilized to conduct this stop, but it doesn't matter. The fact is they committed themselves to a stop under People versus DeBoer. They had Terry versus Ohio. They committed frisk and they failed. They missed that firearm. And I hope they wake up and look at this, not to get mad. If you get mad by what John and I are saying and you actually find it insulting, then you need to actually look at yourself. You need to say, what do I need to do to go forward so I don't miss a firearm like that? Because God forbid, you could get killed on one of your partners. I mean, Jonathan Diller, may he rest in peace. He lost his life. We have to take guns very seriously out there. Persons of interest, there's subjects out there right now that are carrying illegal firearms, and they're carrying it with a purpose, and some are just carrying it to have it. And again, yes, John and I both believe in Second Amendment. I believe in concealed carry. I believe in the Second Amendment. But again, this doesn't appear to be an obliging citizen. This appears to be someone that has a criminal past, is completely comfortable in the presence of police officers. There should be some fear, right? You should have the emotions that you should have uncomfortable emotions when you're involved in the presence of police, when you're committing an illegal action. If you have an illegal firearm, you should be emotionally uncomfortable that, wow, there's a threat here. And the threat is that I could go to jail. And there's absolutely no respect. There's no fear. There's no discipline. And this is a representation. This is reflective of what's going on in our society right now. That is an epic fail by the politicians, by the media, by the upper management of the police department because of lack of training. And that's a failure on that on that team also, that public safety team, or I'm sorry, neighborhood safety team they call it. That's an epic fail. And I hope they look at that to make themselves better. You can't miss a gun. You cannot.
All right, hold on. I'm going to bring one more thing in here. Labro says, I will get flushed by Tariq. Labro, set it up, dude. 2018, set it up. 2018, MSG, set it up, my friend. Set it up. I would love to do it. We'll sell it out. 2018, baby. MSG, sold out crowd. Let's do it. Set it up, my friend. But not to go on that. Let's look at this. I actually have another video, this same incident set in by one of you guys. I really appreciate you guys always being on top of it, sending us the stuff. Let me get this up. Is it up on the screen? Do you see this? No. Okay. All right, here we go. All right, so if you could see, they actually did toss the person. Here we go. This is him being searched. I'm going to play it for you one more time. He was stopped and searched. They have him up against the fence. They're walking back, and here he goes, walking away. He just got tossed by 4 cops, and he turns away, and he flashes the gun that's directly in his see-through white T-shirt. I don't know. I can't even believe that. I didn't see this whole video. So thank you guys for sending that in. I appreciate it. Eric, what are your thoughts on this?
My blood boils when I watch this. All he is doing anti-crime as an anti-crime sergeant. All he is doing special operations. If my guys would have missed a gun like that, I would have went bananas. I would have went nuts. You could get everybody killed. I mean, thank God he's just laughing. He's having a good time because he has no fear of the police. But if he was an actual threat to that team, they'd have a major problem. How do you miss that gun? I used to teach my guys how to dissect someone into 4 and actually properly toss them so that nothing gets missed. I mean, it has to be methodical. And obviously, there's no training. But to me, all that matters is, they look cool. All right? I got one guy here holding his vest, kind of flexing. The other guys are walking around looking like, they want to be tough guys, and they're laughing. Honestly, I support the rank and file, but they look stupid. Thank God we could say that. Thank God you're okay. Thank God this person of interest, this subject, didn't turn the firearm onto you. But you shouldn't be smiling there. You look stupid. You need to go back to the drawing board and say, how did we miss this so this never happens again? Because someone could get killed there. Again, I seen it from the desk. I seen 2 police officers transport a perpetrator. They had him in their car. He had a loaded 25 in his waistband. So I've seen it before. So listen, I don't want to embarrass you, and I don't want to give all the tips on this podcast. Contact us at www.thefinanceunfiltered.com. You can contact John and myself. You can DM us. I'd love to have that conversation. Someone from this team, I don't want this to happen to you again, on how to properly toss someone. I'll show you some tricks. And I'll tell you what, the best way I learned to toss perps was from the perps I arrested. Sometimes I would interview and debrief some of these perps, and they would say, here's why you guys missed this, or here's why you guys missed that. And they would show me, right? You have to build a rapport with people, and they would show us how they would conceal certain firearms, and it really helped. So talk to these perpetrators you arrest. They'll tell you how they secrete things and hide them. Again, you have to be humble. That was actually horrific. I think that's terrible. There's no leadership. There's no veterans to teach them, but everybody's more concerned about looking cool and not doing police work, because that could have been their last day of their life. Every time you encounter someone with a legal firearm, that's the last day of your life.
Yep. So, all right. So we got 1,125 people on here. Thank you for joining us this morning. We just spoke about all of the mishmash in the NYPD. So much. We could stay on that for another 8 hours. We're going to move on, though. We're going to go around. This one's coming by way of New York State. New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They executed a search warrant on a New York man's home to seize his pet squirrel. They also took a raccoon from his home. The man runs like some type of farm. He's a big social media guy. He uses the money that he generates to donate to animal shelters and a lot of other things. Complete animal lover. I know a few cops who had pet squirrels. I know a few. I remember a guy I used to see him all the time when I was down and drawn up in Staten Island Criminal Court. He used to come out every morning. He would eat his breakfast. He was an NYPD cop. He wasn't a court officer. He was an NYPD cop assigned to CJB. He helped when you would have to go draw up. He would help get your paperwork back and forth to the DAs. He would get you seen, and or not get seen, depending on what you wanted to do. If you wanted to make overtime, so that guy would help you. But what he would do is he would come out and he would put food in his mouth. And he had so many. The squirrels loved him. They would come up. They would climb up his shoulder, and they would eat the food right out of his mouth and hang out with him. So squirrels can be known to be friendly. This man found this squirrel who was orphaned, nicknamed it Peanut, raised it. It was an orphan squirrel. I guess because of his social media base, people dropped numerous complaints to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They came in his home, 6 officers. They executed a search warrant. They kept him outside of his home for hours. They took the squirrel and a raccoon out of his home, and then they euthanized both of them. Eric, is this what New York State taxpayers, is this what Americans should expect from law enforcement? Is this an overstep, or is this, oh, well, you broke some type of game law and we need to come down on it?
Listen, under normal times, I would say I don't have a problem with it. And if they're actually addressing crime throughout New York State, and then this was something in addition to it, okay. I mean, it's a little strange to have a squirrel in your house and a raccoon. I mean, I remember we had an apartment in the Bronx in the St. Mary's Projects. I'll never forget. We had a call. We went inside this apartment. The guy had in a cage. He had a possum. He had some weird, like, exotic animals. I don't know. It's strange to have these kind of animals in your home, but to actually go to such great lengths to get a search warrant in New York State right now is crazy, right? Because you could barely get a search warrant. You could barely do any intrusive police work on the most violent perpetrators throughout the entire state right now, especially with bail reform. But again, it just shows that the justice system in New York State and other democratic states also is so heavily weighed against decent people and low level stuff. But yet we're not attacking violent perpetrators throughout the state. I think it's complete misuse of taxpayer money. I'm sure it probably could have been handled another way without having to get an executed search warrant. But this is just ridiculous. Just abuse and misuse of taxpayer money.
Oh, I personally think that it's absolutely ridiculous, and I can have anything in my house that I want. Now, I understand the tiger that was. I understand the tiger that was in inside of the projects. I forget the tiger's name. I understand that's a threat to public safety. That's a threat to the resident. So I understand that, like, we darted that tiger and then brought it to a shelter. But this man lives in a rural part of New York State. There's absolutely no reason why he can't have a squirrel in his home. I think this is a complete, utter, egregious overstep. And for what? For absolute what? So that we could kill the squirrel? Makes absolutely no sense. The dumbest thing I've seen and heard. I'm not knocking the individual officers. I'm knocking whoever made this decision. I'm knocking New York State as a whole, that we're actually going to perform a search warrant and treat someone as if they're a criminal and enter their home and remove their constitutional rights because they have a squirrel in their home. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. It's an absolutely egregious overstep. It should never happen again. And this is when I say that things matter. It can't just always be while I'm doing my job. Oh, what do you want me to do? They told me that you have to put this in your body. I have to do this. Oh, they told me that your podcast is dangerous, so I have to do this. I have to investigate you. I have to give your address to known criminals. I have to threaten you. I have to do these things because of my pension. I have to do these things. This is an egregious, utter overstep of law enforcement authority. This is a complete misuse of law enforcement resources, complete misuse of taxpayer funds. Shame on the judge who gave this warrant. Shame on the people who went through with drawing this warrant up. I think it's absolute egregious. I don't think this should ever happen in America. This should just show you exactly why we need limited government. This is exactly what happens in a police state. If I want to have a squirrel in my home, I should have full ability to have a squirrel. If I want to have a pig in my home, I'm not endangering anybody. I don't need the DC to execute a search warrant on my home so that they could murder a squirrel. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Complete overstep.
That was the other thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, even though they went to these great lengths, so why'd you have to kill the squirrel? Release him in a park. Like, since when do you have a problem with squirrels? I mean, listen, I don't know. I'm not I'm a huge dog person. I love dogs. I've had pit bulls throughout most of my life. But I don't really know much about squirrels. I don't know much about pigs, possums, or, freak animals that people keep in their homes. I don't know if they are a threat, like if they carry disease. I don't know about that. But again, that's your personal home, what you want to do in there. I think, a tiger or a chimpanzee, something that could, really be a danger and attack someone, that's completely different. But these animals, especially if they're caged, I mean, if you want to, what's next? And I think that's really what this is about, John, is what's next? What else? That's really what this is about, right? What else can they go into your home for? Can they eventually go into your home? And we've had this conversation before, right? This is actually something real that's been on the table. Could they go into a home and force you into a camp because you refuse to take a vaccine? Could they go into your home and force you to a camp because they say that you're sick with COVID and you decide to stay home and you're supposed to be in a camp? Could they come into your home and say you didn't oblige by certain things and they're going to come and take you away? So, I think this is symbolic, right? This of killing a squirrel, right? Because they can just release the squirrel into the park. So if they said they would have to, if New York State said, you know what, we have to execute a search warrant to the homes of John McCary and Eric Dim because they've been doing this podcast and it's a threat to society, wouldn't cops go in there and execute that search warrant? They said you have to shoot John and Eric and you have to, because what the information that they put out hurts people's egos. Would they do it? And unfortunately, it seems the answer would be yes, because at no point do we see anyone standing up and say, "Wait a minute, this has gone too far." I mean, yes, I always blame the leadership, and I do, but at some point, we have to be able to recognize, say, "Wait a minute, what are we doing here?" That's why there's a skill in leading people, your subordinates, leading people that are below you, but it's also a skill in managing people above you. And sometimes you have to ask questions. Sometimes you have to say, wait a minute, what exactly are we doing here? We're going to do what? We're going to kill a squirrel? Can't we just release into the park? So you have to band together. You have to start asking these questions.
Yeah. Again, I think it was egregious overstep. I just think that it's honestly, I see why it's getting a lot of attention. A lot of people are downplaying it. Oh, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? It's just a squirrel. Nobody cares. It's a big deal. It's absolutely wrong. It's a big deal. It's a big deal that the government thinks that they could just come in your house because you have a pet that they don't like and basically treat you as if you are a drug dealer or a murderer when we play with kid gloves with drug dealers and murderers and we don't want to go in your house. So it doesn't make any sense. Like it just flies in the face of everything that they tell us. It flies in the face of it. So let's bring up this video. This video comes out of Jacksonville, Florida. This is the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Again, I'm not going to play the volume on it. I think there's like rap music or something. You're not going to hear anything. But I think at one point, the man, we don't know what the encounter is for. Obviously, I would assume this game, the Florida-Georgia game, it's called the largest cocktail party in the world. I would assume that this dude was being a drunk moron and somebody alerted the police. When the police encounter him, they're telling him to leave or that he's under arrest, and he refuses to comply. I believe at one point he does use a racial slur against the black officer. So it's my contention immediately upon watching this that the police are in their full right to either remove or arrest him. I don't believe cops just come up and arrest you for no reason. I believe there's always some type of law attached to it, even if it's ridiculous as you've had a squirrel in your home. So I don't think that the cops are just coming up here like stormtroopers and snatching him. They have some type of law. Now, whether you agree with that or not, obviously a sporting event while you're drunk isn't the time and place to fight that out. You have to deal with that in a court of law. This is what makes America great, is that we have the ability to have due process in this country and fight it out, unless you're that poor squirrel that they euthanized before you got a chance to do that. But so I think ultimately, I don't care what the stop's for. People are asking, is it a lawful stop? I don't know if it is. I assume that it is. But whether it is or it isn't, I never agree with getting physical with police officers and resisting because it just escalates and make a situation worse. Eric, you got anything on this before we play the video?
No, I agree. And again, I think you said it, but we should say it again. There's context missing of what led to the interaction between some fans at a stadium along with the police. So there's context missing, but what we have to do is give our best assessment and give our perspective of what we have. And that's the actual video. And I think we're going to surprise people and give an actual fair assessment. So let's get on with the video, then we can jump into it.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not going to play the volume on the video, but here you go. The male's sitting down. It appears his girlfriend is yelling at him to comply. There's one cop standing in front of him. He's trying to tell him something. He's videotaping the cop. There's another officer over to his right pointing a taser at him, trying to grab his hand. He kind of like tells him, "Get off me, don't touch me." And the officer tases him right there as he's seated. So question for you right there before we go further. He's non-compliant in his seat. The officer goes to touch him, and he kind of like just flails away with his arm. He flails away with his arm. I would consider it passive resistance. I wouldn't consider it aggressive resistance. How do you feel about the taser deployment immediately upon that?
Oh, absolutely. It's passive resistance. But what's important always is to form your baseline when you're doing policing, right? So what is your crowd? What is your audience? And what is your subject? So your subject is at a stadium where people are having a good time. They're unarmed because they already went through metal detectors, right? They're there. They're drinking. So you're dealing with someone that's probably under the influence. They're probably drunk. And he's also sitting down. He's at a stadium. So Most likely, unless he managed to get something in, right? It's possible, but most likely not, because they go through metal detectors and they go through screening and scanning to get into the game. So most likely he's unarmed and he's in a sitting position and he's drunk. He's drunk and disorderly. So you have to have a different temperature and a different tempo, and you have to form a different baseline when dealing with someone who's drunk. And you have to be, by de-escalating that, you have to be more acceptance that they're not going to follow your orders right away. I think deploying the taser while someone is sitting down at a stadium who's drunk at a game is completely overzealous and way over the top. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, so I think that you have to be very cautious in this scenario. You're in an elevated position, but I do think that he's seated and passively aggressive at this point. You see his girlfriend is right there, and she's actually shocked by the taser deployment. So she wasn't expected. I don't believe that there was a proper warning given to him. But again, we see the taser fail again. And this is not in a dynamic situation at this point, by the way. He's in a seated position at a stadium. So it's not dynamic at this point. The taser does nothing but enrages him and I think escalates the situation. It actually does not work as intended. I don't think that a stadium is a good place to deploy a taser. But it is in defense of the officers, I will say this is kind of a tricky situation. For those of you who have been to sports arenas, especially this looks like you're high up here. This looks like they're in the back of the stadium all the way up top. And, it's narrow up there. Those walkways are very narrow. You could easily, if you guys start to roll over those chairs, you could fall a far distance and potentially lose your life. So now, as much as I don't want to deploy a taser here, I also don't want to wrestle or fight with anybody up here either. I agree.
And I think that's why I think these cops, unfortunately, think they were overzealous. And I think that they didn't move smartly when it came to this particular event. You have someone who's drunk, disorderly, sitting in his chair. You have the girlfriend there who's actually telling him to stop and to listen to the police officer. So that's a great tool. If you're the two police officers there to utilize, obviously, you're absolutely right. He's a big guy. He's drunk. So you don't want to get involved into a tussle, especially in an elevated stadium like that. Of course, you could fall down. You guys could get seriously hurt. So initially, he was talking to him from the end of the seat aisle along with the partner. I think that was correct. At that point, they should have utilized the girlfriend and said, listen, do me a favor. Whatever the case is, to me, it appears like he was possibly ejected. Listen, do me a favor. He's drunk. We ask you kindly to help him and escort him out of here. He has to leave. That is the de-escalation, right? We always hear that buzzword, de-escalation. Sometimes it's immediate action, which is de-escalation, and sometimes time is on your side. In a scenario like this, most likely, 99% chance, he's unarmed, he's drunk, so he's a soft target. But I do love this video. The reason why I love it, and I was talking about it constantly, I love this video because it shows the ineffectiveness of the tasers. And the data that I provided is at 49% of the time it's ineffective. But we see more and more it's complete failure, and I'm sure that data has to be even far more. I would love some new data be presented on it. But it just shows the taser is an epic fail. I don't think you should be deploying the taser at this point. I think that the best tool would be to utilize the girlfriend. You have time on your side. He's not a threat with a firearm or potential knife because he went through screening and scanning. He's unarmed. He's sitting down. That's a position. Listen, buddy, I know you're drunk. You had a good game. Please, they could have taken their time with this one. And again, but just shows the tasers are completely useless.
Yeah. So again, the taser fails again. All right. So let's go further in the video. So he deploys the taser. I think this is the point where the male, now he rips the darts out of him. He rips the darts out of himself. And now he stands up. Now you're in a bad spot, right? And I believe at this point, he uses a racial slur and kind of eggs the black officer on. I have to note, though, at this point, both of these officers have handcuffs in their hand. What do you think about that?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, right? From a tactical standpoint, that's a disaster. I always taught my men and women especially, and I know some of them are watching right now. They remember, do not take your cuffs out until your perpetrator, your person of interest, your subject is ready to be cuffed. You have to have custody control over your adversary before you take your cuffs out. And it's for two reasons. When you take your cuffs out, your dominant hand is now occupied because no one takes it and puts it in their non-dominant hand. So your dominant hand is occupied, and now you have one hand when you're tussling with a perpetrator, trying to hold on to that cuff for dear life. It becomes a dance. It's absolutely ridiculous. Don't take your cuffs out until the person is ready to be cuffed. Now you have two hands, and your dominant hand is not occupied. Terrible tactics.
Yeah. So, all right. So now he is aggressively resisting, in my opinion. He's standing up. He's a threat to you. The handcuffs, the officer that's below him in the tier below has his handcuff out. The other officer puts his taser away and proceeds to grab his handcuffs. Horrible, horrible tactics. Those hands need to be free. While he was seated was the time if he wasn't going to listen, if they couldn't talk him down. I don't know how long this went on prior. This could have been a half hour. They could have been trying to talk him down for a half hour. We don't know. We weren't there, so we don't know. But this is a horrible tactic. I agree with you 100%. Those hands need to be free in order to grab his hands. And then once you have him in a position to be cuffed, get your handcuffs and cuff him, right? So I think tactically, bad move here, right? So let's go a little further in the video. So now the officer takes his cuffs out. He goes to touch him. He's in on him now. He's close, right? The guy's now yelling at the girl. You know what? I don't even know if this is his girlfriend or if this is someone else, but she actually has a phone out video, and he's yelling at her now. I don't know who she is. It appeared to be his girlfriend because she was standing next to him. Now she's in the row back. And so now the officer who tased him now goes to put his hand on him. And he says, I'm not going. I'm not going. He's flailing his arms, but he's not physically, has not done anything to the officer at this point. The officer grabs the man's shirt. The man now smacks the officer's hand away, right? So the officer's pulling the man by his shirt, and the officer, in order to stop the cop from pulling on his shirt, smacks the officer's hand away. And now, and now he gets tased again by the other guy. So two taser deployments. You could see that, right? As the hand gets pulled away, second officer who's below him tasers him. Boom. And what does he do? He begins to fall over the stadium chairs and into the next ring, but he's pulling the tasers out. So second deployment of the taser fails. He starts to go back. He crushes one of the stadium chairs. Second officer moves in, handcuffs in hand, grabs him, grabs his right arm with his left hand, with his right hand, grabs the perpetrator's left arm with his right hand. He has the cuffs in his left hand, and he punches the man with the cuffs. Once he comes over, he's tased. Pushes him down, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The cuffs are open. He's striking him with the cuffs in his hand, almost as a brass knuckle. And now the cuffs are completely open, striking the man. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Man's now actively resisting arrest. He has not struck the officers, though. I will note that. He is pushing them off of him. He's attempting to push him and stop this assault. 12, 13, 14. 14 times he was struck with the handcuffs over and over again. Most of the time they were open. Proper use of force or excessive? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that bad decisions and bad tactics led to this outcome here. I think that I think that it's terrible tactics to have your cuffs out, right? At some point, he does actively resist, and deploying punches at that point is necessary, but only because it was bad tactics from the beginning and bad decisions. I believe that if there were proper decisions and proper tactics, it wouldn't have gotten to this point. I think they could have gotten into handcuffs or at least have him ejected different, but their approach completely escalated. He's obviously under the influence. He's not thinking straight. And they de-escalated the situation and made it far worse. So do I have a problem with them deploying punches and the cuffs were in the hand? No. I mean, I don't think he was intentionally trying to hit him in the face with the cuffs, but it was incidental because of bad tactics. I just think it was completely overzealous, horrible tactics. I think they need to go back to the drawing board. And I think they caused the situation. And I don't think he's of sound mind. He didn't strike them, which is good. But he's not completely of sound mind. He's under the influence. So he's not going to be completely compliant and coherent. Just terrible tactics. Their approach was terrible. They could have had more dialogue. Again, it doesn't matter how long that they were there before. We're analyzing and making our assessment based on what we see here. And the dialogue was just terrible. And he keeps escalating the situation. You could see the black officer's posture, the white officer's posture also. There's no communication. It was terrible. This could have been a much worse situation for both of them. And also for the subject, we got far more injured. I mean, we see the damage to the chair. It's just a horrible situation. At this point, he's deploying punches, but I don't think he's deploying punches with the intent to hit him with the cuff. But again, bad decisions, bad tactics leads to bad results.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, I'm going to say right now, it appears that he was hooked, totally hooked. And I agree that he was actively resisting the minute he stood up. And I agree with everyone that says that this man's a threat. I 100% agree with it. And he should be treated as a threat. I agree with everyone saying all of that without a doubt. But he never moved at them. The officer moved at him with his cuffs in his hand and began to strike him in the face over 10 times with his handcuffs in his hand. I don't know what his intention was. I don't know if it was bad tactics that led to it, but he moved in with handcuffs and started to strike him with handcuffs in his hand, knowing that the handcuffs were there. I think if this was New York City, he's instantly arrested. He's instantly suspended. He would really be indicted. I don't know what would happen in Florida. I know right now if this was the NYPD, as long as it wasn't one of people that are close to Eric Adams, they would be this would immediately be referred to the district attorney's office without a call. And more than likely, this officer loses his job. I don't know that that's the intention behind it, was to strike him with the handcuffs. I think all was good. All was good. I think that if you're going to use force in a high up elevated situation, you're going to raise your level of force when someone's actively resisting. I completely get it. I'm not a huge fan of the taser, but I understand it. I 100% agree with you don't have to wait to get hit to be hit. I'm sorry. You don't have to wait to get hit to strike. So I have no problem with them actually trying to deploy strikes in order to gain compliance. I don't believe it was necessary at this point. I believe that a lot of this was bad tactics, and I think that they could have spoken this person down. But again, I wasn't there. I don't know. I don't know exactly what he was saying. But I think overall, this is I think what we witnessed was excessive force.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think the punches with the cuffs were excessive. Again, from my appearance, my observations, I don't think the cuffs were intentional. Again, it appears that he's left-handed. It appears his left hand dominant, right? He's holding his taser in his left hand. He holds the cuffs in his left hand. And again, that's why I always say you don't want to take the cuffs out until someone is ready to be cuffed, right? For several reasons. Because one, your hands are occupied, so you don't have two hands free, and it's always your dominant hand that's occupied, which is another problem. And that's why he's striking him with the cuffs, because they're in his dominant hand. And most people strike with their dominant hand. It's natural, unless they have any specific training. I just think that they caused this situation. It got to this point of him actually actively resisting. I think it could have been avoided based on my observations, what I've seen. I think that their tactics were terrible, and I think it was based on bad decisions. Bad decisions from the get-go. Initially, when he's at the end of the aisle and the partner had him flanked and they had like a wedge the bird's eye view to the subject, and they engage him in conversation, I think they could have got him out of there. There were other people there that were kind of supportive and saying, hey, the girl was saying you got to go. So I think they could have got him out of there. But the fact that he's deploying punches with the cuffs in his hands, incidental to bad tactics, bad decisions. They need better training. He also, unfortunately, he got hooked. He got hooked by someone that's drunk. And you can see right away he's grabbing him with the taser in hand. It's just, the whole thing's bad. I mean, why are you grabbing him with the taser in the hand? Again, you shouldn't have if you're going to utilize the taser, you should have it be from a distance to utilize that taser, because someone is actively resisting and they're being super aggressive. And they caused him to be super aggressive. They had him sitting down. If he really was a threat, if they had good tactics, that was the opportunity to jump on him when he was sitting and then cuff him from that sitting position. But again, bad tactics, lack of training for police departments throughout the entire country.
So you're the police chief. What do you do? I'm telling you right now, I am suspending him and I'm referring criminal charges to the DA's office. What are you going to do?
I'm not sure about criminal charges, but definitely suspending him. And I know in most of these agencies in Florida or outside the NYPD, you can terminate them. I think he should be terminated for this. Absolutely. I think I don't see him being fit for law enforcement. Completely hooked. I mean, we're at a game. We're not talking to someone that has a potential firearm on them. We're not talking to someone that has a blade on them. We're not talking about that he immediately got up out of the chair and postured towards them. He was sitting down. They could have walked him into this. I've seen this before. John, you've seen this. We've seen people like this with this demeanor. If he was actively aggressive, he would have got out of that chair right away and approached them. But he didn't. He didn't approach them until they approached him and put him in a vulnerable position because he was intoxicated. Again, do I blame the cops completely? Is there fault on this intoxicated subject? Absolutely. But again, it's the police officer's job to remain professional and utilize the best tactics, come up with a plan how to get this person cuffs. He's not armed. He's not a threat. Is he a threat of a tussle at that point? Yes. But they're the ones that have created that because of their bad decisions. He should be terminated. I'm not sure if he should be charged. I don't see him as being malicious. I see him being stupid.
Well, like I said, I would refer it to the DA's office to let them check the criminality of it. A lot of people are asking what the initial encounter was for. Again, I from what we know, it was the guy was being a drunk idiot, which, you know, I mean, you're allowed to be ejected. So if at any point in the time, anyone in the stadium, anyone that's in charge of stadium wants you to be ejected, if you refuse to be ejected, that's criminal trespass. That is a crime. Technically, that is something you should comply with the law, and the police aren't just going to walk away and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to have this conversation with this drunk idiot who's being ejected from the stadium right now. Work this out. Now, again, I don't have a problem that he struck him with the cuffs. I have a problem how he struck him with the cuffs. If the officer took out the cuffs, which we're not fans of, and we both said, if the officer had taken out the cuffs to arrest this man and the man started to swing and attack the officer, and then incidentally the officer started to fight back and strike him with what only he has available is his hands, and the cuffs happen to be in there, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I would say, you know what, it is what it is. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm not going to drop him. There's a weapon that could be used against me. Obviously, we've seen that cuff hanging. That thing could go right through your eye. That thing could go in your neck. That thing could go in anywhere in your body. It could be used as a sharp object at this point. And that's the same reason why I wouldn't start to begin to deploy strikes on someone who has not actively attacked me first with the cuffs in my hand. So yeah, I would 100%, I would immediately suspend him, refer him for criminal charges to the DA's office. I don't believe that, you know, and ultimately, I'm sure Florida's a little different. I believe I would terminate the officer. Unfortunately, it's a bad situation. It was bad tactics. But I think he got hooked here. I think you see it clear as day. And it's not the amount of strikes that did that for me. It's the approach with the handcuffs in hand. It's the actual approach of it. You know, there wasn't tact and care. And honestly, I'll tell you, they're both two guys. And I'll always say that if you have two men versus one man, you should be able to get him. But this dude's a big dude. He's drunk. You're at a severe tactical disadvantage because you're not on the ground, you're high up in the air, you're in these chairs. They really should have gotten more officers to the scene the minute he stopped being compliant to also alleviate this. I think this video is a training video for years to come, in stadiums particularly, of what not to do.
Yeah, that was a terrible position. Honestly, I'm not even sure. Depending on the subject or the context, I'm not sure if I'd. Again, there's a lot of time missing in this. I don't know if I'd walk up immediately to the top tier of that stadium where he's at. Maybe from a lower part of the tier and say, "Hey, listen, buddy, can you come down here and get yourself to a more flat platform?" Or I mean, at some point, maybe they had to go up there because he was drunk and disorderly. Maybe he was ignoring them. But they could have kept their distance, stayed at the end of the aisle, and had more of a conversation. But his approach towards him, was very domineering. And you're not dealing with someone that's of sound mind. He's intoxicated. And also, I always learn that, and John, you probably learned the same thing also. If that is his girlfriend, which we suspect it is, you never want to try to be domineering to someone in front of their girlfriend, because now you put him in a position where he's going to show his masculinity, because now you're going to hurt his ego. Right, especially when he's intoxicated, that he has to show face in front of his woman, so he's not going to back down. So maybe that's why sometimes, you want to get the guy, hey, come down here, buddy, and talk to him. Say, hey, listen, I don't want to embarrass you in front of your lady. Why don't you, walk out with us, get you out of here? So you have to know your audience. That's why I say know your baseline, know your audience, and every subject and every situation is completely different. But again, I think this cop was completely overzealous. Apparently he was making some racial slurs, which is completely wrong. But at the same time, we have to have thick skin and we have to be tolerant of that. I mean, I've had people say crazy things to me also. But, every day, what do we hear? Suck my blah, blah, blah. That was my name every day. And we have to be tolerable of it, unfortunately. And this police officer just not right for the profession.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you totally. So I'm just going to play devil's advocate here real quick. Now, what if this officer was white and the male that was resisting arrest was black? Does that change anything on how you view this? Would that change anything in the public's eye, in your opinion?
I'm sorry, what were we saying again?
What if the officer that struck the man multiple times with handcuffs in his hand was white, and the individual who was drunk and disorderly was black? Does that change anything about your assessment, or do you believe that would change anything about the assessment in the public's eye?
Well, I think that the public, absolutely, I think we would get more critique on this if that was the case, or if this was a white police officer and a black subject. I think, and I don't think it's appropriate that he hit him with the cuffs. I think Ron Layson put a comment here also that I'm surprised you're saying it's okay. I'm not saying it's okay. What I'm saying is I don't believe that his intentions were to hit him with the cuffs. I think that's bad tactics of having the cuffs in your hand for that reason, because if you are involved in a tussle, when you're deploying strikes, for one, your dominant hand is occupied. You don't have two hands. But what I'm saying is I don't believe his intentions were to hit him with the cuffs. I believe his intentions, if they were to hit him with the cuffs, would be to hold the cuff and to try to hit with the cuff. I don't believe his intentions. I believe the cuff was still in his hand and he was deploying strikes. I believe he was correct in deploying strikes at some point, but I believe it's bad tactics by having the cuffs out. So I don't believe his intentions were to utilize the cuffs. It's just incidental because those cuffs are in the dominant hand. And when you're trained, and unfortunately, why police officers are not trained properly in most departments, they're trained to take the cuffs out and to cuff someone. But the problem is the transition when someone starts to fight or tussle. Now you have to put those cuffs away because you're trained. Most people, you could try it. Just try it. They're going to hold on to those cuffs for dear life, and they're going to continue to do their next operation. If it's deploying strikes or trying to hold someone, they'll still have the cuffs in their hands. Most people cannot detach and just throw those cuffs on the floor. I used to teach my cops, if you can't put them away, just throw the cuffs on the floor, and someone else can pick them up. So, but again, I do think that dynamic would change it, just like we see with Daniel Penny on the subway. Unfortunately, it does change the dynamic for appearance for the public when it's a black subject and a white police officer. But again, I wouldn't blame the white police officer if he had the cuffs in his hand. I would say it's bad tactics. It's bad training. Your hands should be unoccupied until that person to be cuffed because those cuffs are in your hand. Same thing if someone had a radio in their hand. If they start deploying strikes and the radio's in the hand, and the majority of the time, it's not to utilize the radio. It's because they're trained and they can't disconnect from the item that's in their hand.
Yeah, I'm definitely like I think that I think when we look at the cuffs, I think that I'm borderline on that it was intentional because you moved in with the cuffs in your hand. Oh, did he get hooked and his adrenaline was flowing and he didn't know what he was doing? Possibly, but maybe not. Maybe not. You moved in on him with the cuffs in your hand. You just started throwing haymakers at him, and he never threw a haymaker back. He never really did it. The only thing he kind of ever did was defend himself and kind of try to push away. So although it was aggressive and he's a danger, and I'm not saying anyone should wait to strike, the officer was by far the aggressor. And I think it was terrible, terrible, terrible. I think that if you switch races, there would be riots across every major city in America right now. We would be demonizing the entire police force. And it's sad to see that because my stance wouldn't change on it regardless of the races. I think we break things down on this show fairly. We don't really put race into the scenario at all. Just the only reason we're even bringing it up now is to highlight the hypocrisy in the corporate media world with our politicians. I think I think that you would see a totally different reaction nationwide. It wouldn't just be these small articles on these small papers. This would be mainstream media. You'd have all of the highly overly paid former NYPD chiefs crying on CNN and MSNBC and Fox on how horrible this is, and we need better policing, and we need better training, and we need to come together, and all of this other stuff. So I think that although the race doesn't matter, it does. It weighs out heavily in this scenario because I think that if this officer was white, he would have been fired before he ever got back to the station house.
Oh, absolutely.
And I also think that he would have, and the DA would have been talking about how they're going to prosecute him immediately for using the cuffs as a weapon.
Oh, it definitely changes things. I really appreciate having friends and listeners to the podcast. I always have opposition meets opportunity. I appreciate some people saying, oh, they said I'm lying that he hit him intentionally. I don't know if he hit intentionally. So I'm only giving you my observations because from my observations, I've seen it before where cops had their hands occupied with a taser or a radio or a cuff, and they deployed a strike because they had to, because they're trained and they couldn't let go of it. These were observations I made throughout my experience being an anti-crime sergeant, special ops lieutenant. So I would teach my guys, say, listen, don't take the cuffs out until the subject is ready to be cuffed. But if you make that mistake, if you take your cuff out and they start to tussle with you, I would train my guys, just open your hand and drop it. And honestly, it took some time to really train them. They couldn't disconnect from it, and they still had it in their hands. So, and the way he's holding it, it appears to me, I believe he's trying to hurt the guy. I do. I believe he's punching him, and he's also trying to hurt him. But I don't think he's intentionally trying to hit him with the cuffs. I'm willing to watch it several times and make these observations. Some people believe it was intentional. But think about it. If you had a pair of cuffs in your hand and you're deploying strikes, it would probably hurt your own hand also. So I think if you really wanted to hit the guy with the cuff, wouldn't you just put your hand inside one of the cuffs and kind of swing it? That's my interpretation, my observation. I could be wrong. I'm always willing to watch it again. But based on those observations, that's what I see. So again, I'm not saying it's right to hit someone with cuffs, but I don't believe it was intentional to hit him with cuffs. I think it's completely just bad tactics. You shouldn't have the cuffs in your hand or anything in your hand until someone is ready to be cuffed, because it's also your responsibility to bring someone in custody without causing them pain, without hurting them. You want to cause the minimal amount of damage. So I think that's enough with that. But again, like I said, I'm always open to it. I'm going to watch it several times. If someone sees something different, hey, that's why it's great to give our perspective, and we'll give our opinions. And again, this is all opinion-based because none of us spoke to him. We don't know what he was thinking. We're making our observations, and I stand by them, and I appreciate it. Let's go on to the next video.
Yeah. And I think when you look at the cuffs, though, I think that he does adjust them in his punching hand prior to punching. I think that we've seen that. And I think, I don't know who Noam is saying. If you watch it again, you see him adjusting the cuffs in his hand. It makes it easier to punch. Cuffs have been known to be used as brass knuckles. And it appears, I'm not saying that he did that, but it appears that way. It appears that that's how they were being utilized. And then you saw one part of the cuff hanging out, and that was the only part that opened. The other part didn't open because obviously, like you said, it is going to hurt your hand to punch with them. It is, because it's going to clamp down on you 100%. But only one of them clamped down, which means his hand was in one of them. So yeah, enough of that video. Same game, same sheriff's office. Again, this, I don't know what happened here, but it's actually 3 incidents in one. It's 3 different use of force incidents, 3 different cops, 3 different perpetrators. So again, they all appear to be drunk. Alcohol is a terrible drug, and that's why I don't bring my kids to football games. I don't want to be in here. I don't want to be here with my kids. I don't want to be here with my wife. I don't want to be around this many idiots. It's a good time for people who probably aren't really bad people to get drunk and do dumb things. And I'm just not into it. So again, like I said, this game, the Florida-Georgia game, is called the largest cocktail party in the world. It's known for having things like this, right? Georgia and Florida are rivals. Where Jacksonville is, the Jacksonville Stadium, it's only about 20 minutes outside of Georgia. So it's like, it's basically home for both of them. It's not hard for either of the fans to go there. They try to keep the fans separated as best as they can. Sometimes the fans that are fans of Florida are fighting, and sometimes the fans of Georgia are fighting amongst each other. So, I mean, alcohol is a crazy drug. It has to, when not used properly. And this is what we see. So again, we're not sure, but we come into this video where they're fighting. Let's just play the video, and we'll narrate it from here. You see an officer has an elderly man in a headlock. One officer's on top mount, and then one officer, the elderly man, has his hand around the waist of the officer. He appears to be drunken and confused. If you watch it real slow, I'm going to slow this down. I'm going to play this video very slow. What's the slowest we could do here? Playback speed, I'm going to do 1/4. So let's play this video very slow. So you see, again, very bad situation. A lot of people around. They're on the steps. Very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. One officer's on the mount deploying strikes. Man's covering up his face. Officer's deploying strikes. Other officer has the elderly man, standing up on the stairs, and he's laying down haymakers on his head. Looks closed fist. Possibly, I don't know if something's in his hand. I can't tell. And now he goes to bring the elderly man down. And there's a third officer who has another man over a chair. And he's not deploying strikes at this point or at any point that we observe him on video. I do believe he did deploy some strikes, though. Based upon what we see from this video, Eric, excessive or necessary?
I don't see anything in his hand. So obviously we're talking about 2 elderly men here right now, right? I'll say this. Not all people are built the same. My uncle was in his late 70s, and he's built like a brick shit house. He's always been, and I think, thank God he's a good man. Worked for sanitation for over 20 years, so he's got that strength from carrying garbage, and he's still super strong. So if someone had to tussle with him, they would feel it. But these guys appear to be they're elderly. They don't appear to be of that type of stature. I think it's completely excessive. I think they could have been definitely helped differently. I'm not saying it's right that the elderly man had his hands around the cop. That's actually wrong. But I think he could have easily taken him down and just put him in cuffs and had him in custody. If he can't, that's a huge problem also for that police department. Again, lack of training. I see it right now. Anyone that does any training, any grappling, any jiu-jitsu, any wrestling knows that when you put your hand over the top, an overhook, we call it, when you put around someone's head like that, you could see that the cop actually doesn't have training. And that's why he has to deploy punches at that point, because he puts his hands in the wrong placement and he has himself off balance. And he starts to deploy strikes. Now, just the appearance of those hammer fists coming from 12 to 6, which is actually, it was illegal in the UFC. They actually just legalized it again, the 12 to 6 strikes, because of the damage that it could cause. But, in UFC, obviously these guys are trained. But I think it's completely excessive. I think that looks worse than actually the police officer that had the cuffs in his hand. We can go back and forth whether he had those cuffs intentionally or not. But I think this is far worse. You have to fit your baseline. We have 2 elderly men, I think, who could have been dealt with much differently. And if we had the proper training, be put in custody. But the fact that he was deploying those punches so hard and so vast and so fast to someone elderly, both police officers, this is an epic fail. I think it's terrible.
So I can't see the third officer who has the man over the chair, so I don't know what happened there. So I can't really comment on any of that. I think when we look at the elderly man right here who's standing up, kind of has his waist around the cop, where it looks like he has his waist around the cop to stand up. Old man does look kind of drunk. He looks kind of frail. He doesn't appear to be strong at all. I think that the punches appear to be disciplinary. I think that they're excessive. I think they're unwarranted. When we forward over, I know they're in a terrible, dangerous spot, and I don't want to be in that spot at all. I think that he could have easily brought this man to the ground without deploying those strikes, because you see him do that, basically throw him to the ground. They appear to be disciplinary to me. I, again, would suspend this officer. I don't believe that they were necessary. This is an elderly male. Again, I believe that if you reverse the roles here and you change the races here, there would be riots across the country that a white cop was beating an elderly black male.
Absolutely.
That's what we're seeing. So I think this was an excessive use of force is what we're witnessing here. I don't think it's as egregious as striking the man with a cop, but I do think it's probably just as egregious because of the man's age, because you could definitely kill him. 100%. It's an elderly, frail male who's drunk. I don't think it was necessary. When we forward over to the white officer on top of the white man on the stairs, deploying haymakers while the man's covering up, I don't believe that is police work. I believe that is punitory. I believe, again, those are disciplinary strikes that are being deployed and not an attempt to handcuff. You just see the man covering up and the officer laying haymakers in his face. That to me does not appear to be police work. I would again suspend that officer. Also, I believe that there is a problem in the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I do believe that force is necessary. I believe that force needs to be utilized in policing. I've been quoted in the paper time and time again and bashed everywhere for saying that police work is a contact sport and it doesn't look pretty on camera, and that I am somehow cheering on violence of police officers used by violence. And I am absolutely not. I'm saying that being a cop, you will need to use force. You will need to deploy violence. It is a mainstay. It is never going to go away. Tasers, robots, cameras, drones, nothing is going to take away that there are going to be instances where violence is going to be deployed in policing, but the violence must be necessary. Here, again, I don't see where it's necessary.
No, again, I'm glad that you brought up. I think the white police officer's actions were far worse. I mean, he has the elderly man mounted, so in a position where he can't even get to his hands. He's punching him repeatedly in the head. He's no match for him. He's no threat to him. It was absolutely egregious. Again, it does appear to be like a sense of punishment. I think it's horrible. I think they should both be terminated. I think the black police officer, the way he was throwing those hammer fists to that elderly man was ridiculous. He threw so many. And again, I've deployed many strikes. Sometimes the deployment of strikes is absolutely necessary. But when you use force, it has to be significant, and it has to be purposeful, and it has to have a mission. The mission to be either to stop some violence, bring something to a quell, bring someone into custody. But this is 2 elderly men. Again, every time you're in a situation, you have to see what the baseline is. All right, if you're dealing with someone who's a large perpetrator, who's actively resisting or trying to hurt you, who meet your match is a different stature, that would be a different case. But these are two elderly men who are no match for these two police officers. And again, the way that this black police officer is teeing off on this elderly man is absolutely ridiculous. But it also goes into lack of training. We need law enforcement throughout this entire country to spend more money on training so things like this don't happen. I mean, the way the black police officer initially grabbed, if you could go back to that, if you could see when the black police officer, when he puts his arm over the elderly man and he kind of loses balance a bit because there's a lack of training. It's bad positioning of where he puts his hands. If he had the right training, look at the way he's holding him right now. That's bad training. So the guy is able to put his arms around him, which is called a body lock. So if this elderly man had any, if he was in better shape, younger, he could take that cop to the ground. So it's bad training. It's terrible training. But again, with bad training, bad tactics comes bad decisions. And I blame the leadership. And he's deploying strikes. But at some point, I think these strikes are absolutely ridiculous. This is an older man. You should be able just to take him down, put him in handcuffs without deploying one strike. But the fact that they have to deploy so many strikes, it's honestly, it's terrible. This is terrible. It has nothing to do with race. Some people are making race comments here. If that was a black subject and a white police officer, there would be riots in the street. But again, the white police officer mounted on the elderly man is even worse. So again, I think you identified it. We have a problem with this police department. We have a problem with many police departments in the country because of a lack of training. We need to spend money on training. Unfortunately, most of the police departments, they train from who's compliant, and the opposite side of the spectrum where someone presents a firearm or a knife. I think we need to start, we need more training for that middle ground when you're involved in situations like this.
Yeah, Ron Layson says, I don't think we have enough video here to do a proper analysis. 100% agree with you, Ron. I would love to know the whole context of all of this. I agree with you 1,000%. Where I'm going to disagree with you, though, is regardless of what the initial encounter was for, regardless of how these individuals acted prior to this video or what even happened prior to the video, just based upon what I'm seeing here, I'm definitely saying I would suspend both of these officers 100%. Again, you hear people in the crowd yelling, "Stop, he's an elderly male." And I get what you're going to kill him. And I get that people don't understand what's going on. And that always happens. I've stopped people that have just committed violent robberies and people were yelling in their car, "Stop, get off him, leave him alone," as he's violently resisting arrest. I get those things happen. But I think when we're looking at the use of force in this split second time, appears to be hooked, laying haymakers down on an elderly frail man, appears to be hooked, mounted on top of another individual who's covering up and just throwing haymakers on them. I mean, based upon that, we got to say right now, if the public is outraged by any of this, and a lot of people are, I mean, I don't blame them, because if that was my father, if that was my drunk idiot brother-in-law or my brother or my cousin or even possibly myself, I would say, oh my God, this is what the police do? This is horrible. No wonder they want to be defunded. No wonder people call them to defund them.
Well, we say it all the time. The ends don't justify the means. And I get what Ron Layson's saying here. Ron Layson's saying that we can't do a proper assessment from on a bookend level, right, from beginning to end. But based on our observations, we have to give an assessment of what we could see. And our perspective is, and especially Ron Layson, who's a great friend of mine here, he always says that there are different mistakes, right? There's malicious intent and there's mistakes of the heart. And for my observations, based on my opinion, my experience of what I see here, I think that this is malicious intent. The fact that this white police officer's mounted this elderly male and continuing to punch him, I think that's malicious intent. I think the black police officer throwing haymakers and hammer fists to the back of the head of this elderly man is malicious intent. I think they lost themselves. I think we need better training, and I think they need to be suspended immediately. There's obviously something going on with this police department, and I'm sure, I don't know who's in charge of that police department. If we look to the leadership, there's probably failures there, and that's why it's stemming down to the police officers we see in two separate incidents at stadiums. So again, does it matter if these two elderly men, even if they threw something at these police officers, water or something, there's still two elderly men that are kind of frail, and they should be easily dealt with to be put in handcuffs. They do not require this amount of force. Absolutely not. Under no means.
Yeah, and then listen, we're over 2 hours now, but just to sum it up, I mean, this is what happens when you have lack of training and you have people who are frustrated, overworked, overwhelmed, or not people that should actually be in the positions. I mean, I relate this again. I'm going to say that the things that I've seen out of Tariq Shepard, to bring this back full circle onto the NYPD, it wouldn't shock me if he reacted in the public the same exact way as we've seen these officers reacting, disciplinary strikes, authoritarian, because, again, he's unable to hold his temper. He's physically, emotionally, verbally unable to hold his temper whatsoever. I think that we need restrained. We need people who are highly trained, highly masculine, people who know when to deploy and when not to deploy strikes. I think that, it's really important in policing. We're still waiting on Jacksonville Sheriff's Office to put out a statement. They said they are going to look at all the allegations and review the videos, and they will make an assessment. The mayor of Jacksonville, Donna Deegan, has put out a statement. She's waiting for the department statement before she makes an assessment on it as well. And I think we all should as well. But I'm going to say right now, when I look at it, I think they look pretty bad. That's my opinion. I don't support the actions here, and I've supported a lot of uses of force that sometimes, unfortunately, involve people dying. That didn't look too pretty, but I'm not a big fan of this right here. The last two videos that we showed, I'm not a fan of, and I think that people need to look at, well, I think we need to start to view everything from that lens. Well, what if we change the race? Because that's what happens in the media. That's what they do in the media, and those things don't matter. When we look at police videos, we have to be able to look at these from a breakdown of what happened, why it happened. Is it right? Is it proper? Is this something that I think that the police should do, or it isn't? Has nothing to do with color. We can't be throwing, oh, these black cops are racist, these white cops are racist. These are inflammatory, ridiculous statements. One thing has nothing to do with the other. These both easily could have been a black cop beating up a black person. This could have easily been a white cop beating up a white person. Doesn't matter. When we look at police incidents, we have to look at it from that lens. They responded to a call. Person was disorderly. Did we handle this correctly? Is there room for improvement? Is this a training issue? Is this criminal? Those are the ways we have to break down police videos. We just had the police commissioner get shoved by his chief of staff, his 6'6" chief of staff. Police commissioner is an elderly man, appears to be frail, not someone I would want to put my hands on. NYPD statement for that. This morning, in the midst of preparations for the marathon, there was a brief disagreement between two NYPD executives that was witnessed by members of the public. That matter was promptly discussed and resolved, an NYPD spokesperson said. The leaders of the NYPD are passionate about their work, and that is the commitment and drive that helps us to keep New Yorkers safe every day. We are incredibly proud of the work that every member of the department is doing to ensure the extraordinary marathon goes smoothly and safely for the runners and the spectators. I think an absolute bullcrap statement, and I think that I'm pretty disappointed in what I've seen here on these videos as well.
So I'm disappointed, but I'm not shocked. I mean, we said it earlier in this episode, John, that Tariq Shepard would not be held accountable for his actions dealing with the PC, and that both would not be held accountable by Eric Adams and this administration, that this would be swept under the rug, just as Jeffrey Maddrey did on scene. And according to that statement, it was resolved. And exactly, we definitely predicted what was going to happen here, along with our friends and listeners, that nothing would happen. And this is just another incident that's going to be resolved. But what it's going to do is you're actually creating monsters, because it's going to embolden Tariq Shepard even more. But again, now the rank and file has to ask themselves, what are they going to do further? Are they going to comply with the rules and policies of the police department that are only effective for one tier of the police department? Or are they going to move in lockstep and band together and get out to the union and say, we got a major problem here? But I suspect nothing's going to happen, and it's going to be business as usual. Josephine Bisculi, I don't know if you're trolling the podcast or not. I know you're not liking some of the stuff that's being said here. And that's okay. That's what opposition meets opportunity. But I'm going to have to push back on you here. You said training has nothing to do with it. I believe training has everything to do with it. Because, John, you said that these cops are getting frustrated and with malicious intent when they're striking, which I believe people also get frustrated because when you have a lack of training, because police officers and many law enforcement agencies throughout this country are not getting properly trained, that brings out frustration. If you're not trained, just think about it. If you're trying to put something together, fix something, you ever try to fix something in your home and you don't know how to do it, it gets frustrating, right? You try to tighten those screws harder or try to loosen them more, and you end up breaking things because you don't know how to do it, and you get frustrated. Well, the same thing goes for law enforcement. If you're not properly trained and you don't know how to deal with somebody elderly to get them in cuffs without hurting them, and you're not holding them properly, and you're losing your balance, and I'm not saying there was a malicious intent, but when I'm talking about the training aspect of it, if you're not trained properly, that's going to lead to frustration, and you may act out with more force because you're not properly trained. And when people are trained, that brings anxiety levels down, and people are much more calm, and they understand how to deal with people because they do it on the mats. That's why I always tell police officers, and I heard this from a great police officer also, when you're on the mats, when you're training, whether it's jiu-jitsu, boxing, or if you're in the gym and you're working hard, that's where you'll lose. You lose there so that you can win out in the streets. And winning out in the streets doesn't mean just by deploying strikes and overcoming your aggression and someone else's aggression and resistance. But it's also winning by getting someone into cuffs and not causing injury to them. That's a win also, especially when you're dealing with two elderly men. Lack of training. Training has to deal, I would say, I don't know what the percentage are. I don't know if it's 90% of the time, 95% of the time, but I would say it's most of the time it's a training issue. And if it's not a training issue, then it's someone that just has a bad heart and they shouldn't be in law enforcement, and police need to police themselves. So with that topic, I think we hit that point. If anyone, you want to add any more comments, we appreciate it, but that's my assessment on that.
Yeah, and that's it. And then just before we wrap up, Governor Kathy Hochul says that if you support Donald Trump or you support the GOP, you are un-American. This is the governor of New York State. She got the crazy eyes. She's the type of woman I always avoided when I was single. I said, I don't know, they got the crazy eyes, but for some reason, New York State thought that she would be I was like, if I'm not dating you in the bar, if you're not coming home with me on a Tuesday night, I sure as hell ain't giving you my vote. Kathy Hochul got the crazy eyes. She shows us it every day. Most notably when she went up at a church pew and said that God hates certain people and he's very mad at certain people, and how she replaced her cross with a certain necklace that said Vax across her neck. And now she's telling you that if you support Donald Trump or you support making America great again, you are a anti-American. Political rhetoric in this country has to cease. We have to start being able to have conversations with each other. I think this is a horrible statement from her. I hope this is her last term as governor. I hope New York has woken up. I hope New York has started to vote red, and hopefully we could get Donald Trump in my opinion. I think he's the clear choice for president. Remove tax on overtime. That makes me want to sign up again. I did a lot of overtime. You're removing tax. I don't even know how much money I would have made if there were no overtime. And certainly, Kaz Daughtry, how much money would he have made? He made $160,000 in overtime last year, illegally, but he made it. Imagine if his overtime wasn't taxed. Oh my goodness, how much money he would have sitting in the bank right now. So no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security for seniors. That'll ultimately revive the economy. Donald Trump has a plan to alleviate inflation and bring it down and make the cost of goods and groceries reasonable again. Put more money back in your pockets. Reward people who are working and keeping the wheels spinning. And all we have is from Kamala Harris is that she's going to go after price gougers. It's known as called price controls. If any haven't read a book by Andrew Alexander Solzhenitsyn called The Gulag Archipelago, highly recommend you read it. In Soviet Russia, what happened when Stalin's Russia, when they implemented price controls, what happened is inflation rose to a point where the money became absolutely worthless and the price of goods not only continued to rise, they immediately skyrocketed. So the only plan she has is out of Stalin's playbook. So yeah, I'm voting for Donald Trump. I'm sure I know Eric is too. So we're supporting to make America great again. Eric, anything else before we wrap up?
No, again, I think it's important to note that when we give perspective, it's our opinion based on anecdotal experience, based on observations we had doing policing. And we welcome everyone's opinion here, friends and listeners, even if it's opposition, even if it's polarizing, even if it's complete opposite. Everyone's opinion is important. So again, I hope the same thing for friends and listeners to the podcast. Do not get angry at others' opinions. Try to compromise and meet somewhere and at least understand the root causes of their opinion. But give a fair assessment. Give an assessment that doesn't have any bias towards race. Give an assessment on just what you see. But again, I think we should really talk about race when it comes to this. Close your eyes and imagine those two elderly men were two black men, and they were beat by white police officers. We would get a different adverse and a perverse reaction from the public that would be perpetuated by the media. So understand that. Have an open mind, open heart. We appreciate it. I support Donald Trump in this election. He's the man to lead this country at this time. Does that mean he does everything perfect? Absolutely not. People think, if you support Donald Trump, you're some type of like cult member, and he's the Messiah. He's the man for the job right now. Absolutely. If there's any question, watch the Joe Rogan podcast. It's almost a 3-hour interview, and you can just see clearly he has the stamina to do the job. He sits there for almost 3 hours, very candid conversation. And despite the fact that a lot of people say, I've had conversations with people like, he's a narcissist, or they don't like him. First of all, even if that was the case, let's talk about the policies. But he didn't come off to be narcissistic to me at all in that interview with Joe Rogan. Every other person, he was talking about how great they were. He was talking about the pilot that took him to Iraq when they landed in the darkness with no light, how amazing that pilot was. Did he refer to some people as stupid? Hey, that's his opinion. What's wrong with that? Maybe some of those people are stupid, but he gave his opinion, and I think it was pretty honest, and it came from the heart. So with that being said, we'll be back tomorrow morning, 8:05 Eastern time. I'm on Mountain Time right now. It'll be 6:05 for me. Thank you so much, Friends Listed Podcast. If you want to buy us coffee, we appreciate it. And also, just a reminder, we want your designs for a mug. Come up with a design for a mug, something that represents New York's finest for Town Unfiltered podcast, or something pretty interesting. If we like it, we'll put it on the mug. We'll sell it on Printify, and we'll sell you a mug free of charge. And you get to say, hey, you made the design for New York's finest Town Unfiltered podcast. With that being said, thank you, friends and listeners. Corn Pop, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Snake Plissken, Pekin Khan, all our friends here, even Juju. Take care.
All right, people. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, Tuesday, November 5th. We all know what that is. So we'll be back. Finest Unfiltered. We had 1,275 people on here, about 1,300 people the entire time. Appreciate you guys. Do us a favor, like, subscribe. If you like, check the notification bells. Follow us on social media. All links will be below. Store, if you want to buy a coffee cup, whatever. And we'll be back at you. New York's finest, retired and unfiltered podcast. We will be back at you tomorrow. Thank you guys for joining. Tom Sullivan is the Republican, Conservative, and Common Sense Party candidate for New York State Assembly District 23. Tom is a financial professional who served simultaneously in the United States Army Reserve for 30 years and has now retired. His district covers Ozone Park, Lindenwold, Howard Beach, Broad Channel, and the Rockaway Peninsula.
Come November, I would empower our law enforcement agencies to go out there and do their job and not put them or their families or their pensions at risk for doing their jobs. We need drastic change in Albany so that we have a say in this matter, and they realize people of New York State will hold them accountable.
The Sullivan family has a legacy of service. Tom served for 30 years protecting and defending the rights of others. Come this November, he has earned your support. This advertisement's paid for by the Friends of Tom Sullivan.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888-901 Blue. That's 888-901 Blue.